This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It is 4 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but it's too late now, isn't it? Don't you hate people that say, there's something I know, but I can't tell you what it is? Do you work with someone like that? Aren't they the worst people? Oh, you're not going to... I can't tell you. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Well, so you either stay silent, right? Or you spill. There's no middle ground on secrets or gossip. Oh, I know something that'll make your hair stand on end. Oh, really? What? Oh, no, sorry, can't tell you. Can't tell you. Oh, could you imagine how awful it would be to work with someone like that? I would never do that to you, so I'm never going to open the show and say, I probably shouldn't tell you this, so I'm not going to. I, if anything, am probably guilty of oversharing, but I'd rather overshare than undershare. So I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I've got 2 phone-in topics that I have not landed. We've done one already this week. You can probably remember which one it was. You're speaking from a position of extraordinary confidence, aren't you, when you're offering up the 2 topics that you feel very strongly about, but you haven't quite nailed, and you don't know why. God knows, I've got no excuse. Some of my introductions are 20 minutes long. If I can't get to the nub of the matter in 20 minutes, then there's a very real chance that I never will. But you've got to be honest about these things. I haven't quite nailed it. It's 5 minutes after 10. Sadiq Khan will be joining me after 11 o'clock. If you want to get into the building, so to speak, if you want to get a question on the board for him, hold your fire for a moment and reserve your space on the switchboard just in the run-up to the 11 o'clock news, or go to lbc.co.uk. And get your question on the board there, and I can ask it on your behalf. So there are 2 topics that I have not properly landed, and I'm fascinated by both of them. The first is the almost 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in work and not looking for work and not in education and not in training. We've had some fascinating phone-ins around the edges of that phenomenon, but I haven't found them. I haven't spoken to them, or many of them, or any of them possibly, or their parents. I don't know why. There must be a reason why, but the broader the wider the gold mouth, the easier you'd think it would be. So you could say you could talk to me about your children, your niece. I just can't quite find them to work out what it is that they live on. I'm fascinated by the reality rather than the rhetoric of the situation. We've got to get people back to work, and if it's the Daily Telegraph, in order to cut immigration. But how can you possibly get people into the workforce if you don't fully understand why they're not in it now? But it hasn't worked. We hear from people who are looking for jobs and can't find them. We look for people. We hear from people who are in that situation for kind of obvious reasons that are health-based, people who are older. But we just haven't really pinned down that constituency, the most central constituency of people. And I don't know why. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we are talking about today is the second subject that I don't think... Am I being hard on myself when I say this? You probably listen more closely than I do, so you'll have a view on this. But we haven't worked out what to do with Brexit, which is all right, nor's the government. But I for a show that was, for a large part of the last 8 years, defined by Brexit, really. I mean, it pushed us from kind of, middle of the second division to top of the Premier League in terms of radio programmes in this country. And you would think, therefore, that we would have it at our fingertips. We'd know exactly how to deal with each twist and turn. I think I could probably date it back to the point at which Johnson's oven-ready deal, which of course was nothing of the sort, was not only passed by a parliament that had been manipulated by the cull of honest and honourable Conservative MPs, but also greeted by huge swathes of the British media as an event as impressive and exciting as the Second Coming itself. So at that point, you're dealing with an Everest of nonsense so high that you're not quite sure how to get your first step on the foothills. How do you start dealing with this? So you step back from it and you wait for the moment when everybody is prepared, or at least enough people are prepared to say it's not working, or it is very bad for the country. a statement of such extraordinary obviousness that it is still baffling to me in 2024 that it remains in place, this weird self-imposed omerta. The idea that, even the government can't really come out, the Labour government, which is riddled with Ramonas and rejoiners and remainers, that even they can't come out and acknowledge honestly and properly the scale of economic damage being done to the UK by the decision to leave the European Union, the single market and the customs union, most obviously. Liam points out that if we're still at the top of the Premier League by the end of the year, we'll be going into Europe. Well, sadly not, Liam. Sadly not. And that's the point in a way. How do you have this conversation is not something I think I can do as a radio phone, and even by my standards of self-referential laziness, that would be a new low. How do you think I should do my job with regard to, how do you think I should do the thing I get paid for and you don't, with regard to this particular topic, this single most important political issue in the United Kingdom of the last 10 years? I don't know how to get back into it, but I do know this. There's a line in the coverage today that makes my blood run cold. It really does. Even now, the governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, has to say that while Britain's recent performance was not a good story, and that while he took a neutral position on Brexit, he must point out consequences. So even now, deploying objectivity and expertise, the governor of the Bank of England, whose job is exclusively economics, feels that he can't come out and be non-neutral. This is like trying to be neutral about rainwater in a flood, or trying to be neutral. Well, I don't even know what the best analogy is. I've usually got analogies coming out of my ears. Circumstances in which being neutral is absurd stroke obscene. Not because of opinion, but because of observable fact. Observable facts that it is his job not only to determine and disclose, but also, of course, to dissect and deal with. There's a nice little early hello to the alliteration fans listening to the programme. Not only to disclose, but also to dissect and deal with. And I still don't quite get it. So the topic I haven't quite nailed down, because the things that don't usually work during our time together every day are the things that are a little bit too speculative and too theoretical. What do you... I think there's only one thing worse than me saying to you, what do you think is going to happen in the future? Than the only thing worse than that is me saying, what's your opinion about this thing that might happen in the future? Some phone-ins can work like that, but they don't really butter my parsnips because it all seems a little bit pointless. But the more evidence is accrued, the more important it becomes to ask, how is this dam going to break? How is it going to happen? Have a little listen to some of what Andrew Bailey said last night. I'll remind you again, he's the governor of the Bank of England, and he believes it is still beholden upon him to take a neutral position on the thing that he's talking about here.
I take no position on Brexit per se, and that's very important. But I do have to point out consequences. The changing trading relationship with the EU has weighed on the level of potential supply. The impact on trade seems to be more in goods than services, which I don't think is particularly surprising. But it underlines why we must be alert to and welcome opportunities to rebuild relations while respecting that very important decision of the British people.
I mean, in a way, the question I want to ask is can you, City Hall commissioned one report showing that London's economy alone has shrunk by 30 billion, and that was a couple of years ago. So does he have to keep a neutral position on Brexit? Why does he have to keep a neutral position on Brexit? And how is this dam going to break? Because break it must. That's gravity. It has to. I don't know, which one of those do you like most? I listen to it again, actually. Okay, because I think we're going to go in on these words, because the governor of the Bank of England is quite a big cheese. He is a grandish fromage under any measure, right? And he's talking about the British economy. And he is acknowledging the crippling effects of voting in 2016 to remove ourselves from the single largest trading bloc on the planet. It's not his job to talk about bogus interpretations of what sovereignty means. It's not his job to pretend that because services are doing well-ish, relatively speaking, Brexit somehow becomes a good idea. He speaks very coolly about the relationship between those two things. If you're confused by it, just think about what relationship technology has with borders. So if I'm advising you on something, or if I'm doing transactions for you, I don't have to be in your country. If I'm trying to import or export something, then I do. So that's why services and goods are two very, and we're always going to be two very different phenomena in this field. So it's not his job to wang on ignorantly about sovereignty. It's not his job to talk about the will of the people, who of course were hideously and criminally misled. It's not his job to keep the balloon of Brexit bloviation inflated in the way that Boris Johnson was required to do. It's not his job to pretend that there's some mythical Brexit, but it goes to a different school, as lots of people who voted for it are still reduced to pretending. It's not his job to do any of these things. It is his job to maximize the performance of our economy, to make the financial health of this country as robust as it can possibly be. So why does he still think he has to be neutral on the biggest issue of our time?
I take no position on Brexit per se, and that's very important. But I do have to point out consequences. The changing trading relationship with the EU has weighed on the level of potential supply. The impact on trade seems to be more in goods than services, which I don't think is particularly surprising. But it underlines why we must be alert to and welcome opportunities to rebuild relations while respecting that very important decision of the British people.
Okay, I've got another question now. So the first question is, does he really have to remain neutral? 0345 6060 973. And of course, if you ring in and say yes, I'll say why. 0345 6060 973. People who know a little bit more about it perhaps than I do. How about the question of whether or not he's talking twaddle? Is there anything at all meaningful to be gained from that tinkering around the edges that he describes, respecting the result of 2016 when, half the country voted for something that is, we now know, provably impossible? I mean, that's a great question. Does he have to retain neutrality because of that? But is there anything meaningful to be achieved in the context of tinkering around the edges, in the context of trying to rebuild relations? Well, I mean, if I were to go back to my favourite analogy of the whole Brexit period, I would go to the sports club. So you are a member of a sports club. You are told by people like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson that you can leave the sports club and not only retain full access to all of the facilities and the shower, but also somehow get free membership of all the other sports clubs in the world as well. So that without paying anything. So that's what they told you. If you take the sports club analogy now, you have surrendered your membership. You found out you can't go back in again, ever. Every time you try and go through the turnstiles, they've started calling security. Oh, this is outrageous. I've left my towel in my locker. I don't care, sir. You're no longer a member of the sports club. You cannot... I only want 10 minutes on the running machine. I'm terribly sorry, sir. You are no longer a member of the sports club. You can't come. But I was told... I was promised that you needed me more than I needed you. I was told categorically by Boris Johnson that you needed me more than I needed you. So I voted to leave. Now you need me. I'm terribly sorry, sir, but we don't. We'd love to welcome you back in again. Here's an application form. It's 768 pages long and is unlikely to contain membership terms comparable to the ones that you had before you left. Herbert. So, what's the analogy here? Hello, I don't want to rejoin, but I wonder whether I could possibly have 10 minutes in the sauna. Do you see what I mean? I don't know enough to answer this question. But if there is something doable, what is it? 0345 6060 973. So, is it necessary for him to take no position on Brexit. As Thor points out, that is itself an inherently political reason, and it is a statement, and it is articulated entirely for political reasons. The governor of the Bank of England is still frightened of the Daily Mail. The governor of the Bank of England is still frightened of the Daily Telegraph. So he nibbles at the edges of the truth, but insists that he cannot say it out loud because he doesn't want to be on the front page of a mass-selling newspaper, essentially being treated like a judge in 1930s Germany, or indeed a judge in 2016 by Paul Dacre. Enemies of the people, crush the saboteurs. Hey, you can have some sympathy for him in that position, but someone's going to have to grow a pair soon in that kind of job. I take no position on Brexit, but it's bloody awful. It's mad, right? Absolutely bonkers. Unless, of course, it isn't. In which case, I want you to tell me why you think that it is right for the governor of the Bank of England to pretend or adopt, whatever you prefer, a neutral position on Brexit. And I also want you to tell me whether or not there is any mileage in this so-called rebuilding of relations while respecting the vote. Because I think the reason I haven't nailed this down as a topic, I think the reason it doesn't quite fly yet, is because there isn't. There's no sort of Brexit light. I presume Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer know this. There's no kind of, oh, well, this is almost as good as being a member, but not quite. Unless you join the single market or the customs union. But, of course, the single market certainly entails adopting the 4 freedoms, including freedom of movement. So I don't think there is such a thing. I just don't think that Andrew Bailey is describing reality to you when he talks about the need to restore relations. And who is qualified to tell us what that might look like? I don't know. So what do you think about this notion of neutrality even now? It's a bit like, King Canute sitting on the beach, and I know the proper story of King Canute, don't at me. He's sitting on the beach and the tide comes in, and one of his advisors says, well, I still have to adopt a position of neutrality on whether or not the king can stop the tide from coming in. So King Canute goes to the beach, you know this story, to prove to his barons that he's not omnipotent. He wants to prove to them that he can't do everything. He's kind of like the opposite of Donald Trump. He sits on the beach in his big old throne, and the tide is coming in, and he goes, halt! Halt the tides! And the tides carry on coming in. And he turns to all his barons and he goes, see? I told you I wasn't omnipotent. I told you I wasn't all-powerful. To his enormous annoyance, for the rest of history, the story is told the other way round, as if he honestly thought he could stop the tides coming in. But that's not what happened. Imagine if you're standing next to King Canute. You're the governor of the Bank of England. King Canute has just tried to stop the tides coming in. The tides are washing around your ankles, and the governor of the Bank of England goes, I must still retain a position of neutrality on this subject and respect the vote of the people who voted for the tides never to come in again. They're in. Make sense of it for me, please.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:24 is the time. Tom writes, neutrality is to support the current situation. Yes and no, Tom. He is saying we need to do something different, but I don't know what. And Jonathan writes, I would say that anyone who doesn't have an opinion on Brexit has no place being in charge of anything. We know it was a mistake. There would be overwhelming support for rejoining once Starmer can convince the EU that would be the end of it. And they can't go in hard to rejoin until they know that we will be allowed back in. So what role should the Bank of England's governor be taking? Constantine is in Eltham. Constantine, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say I think the Bank of England should, he really should disconnect and stop conflating goods and services. I work in logistics and I've seen what's happening in the goods side. It's made life incredibly difficult because we used to have everything work easy. We had to standardize European Union-based systems for filing for customs and all of that stuff. And since Brexit, we've had vendors and suppliers dropping off and stopping business because they couldn't figure out the legal framework of how do we exchange the necessary filings and all of that stuff. So I really think they should be stopped, grouped together.
It must seem slightly surreal to you to be immersed in the world you inhabit, your livelihood, your career, and then to turn on the radio, and even someone like me who's got a pretty good record of getting things right in this area, we still have to conduct the conversation as if somehow debatable what's happened to your world, as if you're not being honest about the benefits. You're keeping secret about all the great advantages that have been bestowed upon you since we left the European Union, and then of course then you turn to the dishonest media that's been proved wrong about everything, and they're sort of telling you to shut up and get over it.
It is. I laugh with despair because it is.
There's a phrase. There's a phrase for the ages. I laugh with despair. I'm having that. Crikey, that's my next book.
It's because I work in the technology, and you mentioned that the impact on technology. So my job is I work in the technology arm of a logistics, one of the biggest logistics companies on the planet, and I know how it had to scramble to just be able to ship a container load from Spain to the UK and vice versa.
Yeah, and it was as easy to send it to Manchester as it was to Madrid, and now they are worlds apart, and vice versa, of course. So, I mean, I know you know this, but I don't think you can ignore services because, things not being awful in the context of services is, for those of us who understand Brexit, a kind of win. It's not a win for people who said that Brexit was going to improve things, because things aren't as bad as they might have. But he has to acknowledge at least that the impact on goods is much greater than the impact on services. Yes. So I understand your point about conflation, but I don't think he should ignore it altogether. Do you have a view on what he's talking about in terms of rebuilding relations without undoing anything that was done post-2016? Is there, because you are arguably better qualified on this than he is there anything that can be done to ameliorate the situations you describe that wouldn't involve undoing some of the things done since 2016?
I don't know, honestly. And it's outside of my remit, but what I can say is it's become a nightmare in logistics over the years. I can give you a very simple example, just following when it was all finalized. We had vendors that came to us and said, do you have any idea what we do now?
Yeah.
People had no idea what the legal framework for filing these things are now. And they were coming to us and we're like, we don't know either.
We don't know either. And it's not over, is it? They're still postponing some of the changes. Things are still being put off, which will add to bureaucracy and red tape for people in your line of work.
Correct. And I can give another personal example. I used to have a side gig on the side. I used to be a network engineer, so I do small office networks.
Oh wow!
And a little bit of money on the side when I was free. And right now I've closed it down because I don't have the margins anymore, because some of the network equipment I order comes from Europe, and something that costs 500 quid still costs 500 quid, but I pay between 100 and 200 tax, which basically wiped out any margins.
On a much less important note, I just had a small parcel returned to my home. I just tried to send it to Dublin. I spent quite a lot of money with Parcel Force to send it, but it turns out it fell foul of customs rules, and so it's back in my porch as we speak. Are you, forgive me for this, but are you, just going on your accent alone, are you Danish originally?
No. I'm originally from Eastern Europe. I'm Bulgarian, but I moved into the UK around 14 years ago.
Mark in Staffordshire has tracked the career of Jan Molby, the former Danish footballer, and he thought Jan Molby was on the line talking to us about logistics. So I just thought, on Mark's behalf, I thought I'd double check. But you are one of this great army of people who know what they're talking about, still being squeezed out of the conversation about the stuff that you know what you're talking about. Oh, I got a little frisson there of nostalgia for those little moments where you'd go, no, I'm not mad. The people who do it are described. It's like Kieran the van, Constantine there, imbued with the spirit of Kieran the van driver, right? Listen, this is what I do for a living. Let me tell you the facts. I've got a mate who's a bricklayer, right? He doesn't know I know this, but he was telling another mate of ours that he hates talking about politics with me because I always kind of come out on top. And he said, it's a bit like what would happen if I gave him a trowel and told him to build a wall. I'd just stand there laughing at him. He goes, that's what it's like trying to argue with him about politics. If it's your field of expertise, leave it to the experts. Let him build the bloody wall. But no, we're relying on the insights of Jacob Rees-Mogg, Liz Truss, Marc Francois when it comes to international trade, to the point where even the Bank of England, 8 years after the vote, the governor cannot tell the truth. He has to say, oh no, I have no view. What's going on? Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 10 is the time. Listen, it's not bringing the economy to its knees, but obviously I'm not alone. Claire says, I paid £60 to send a package from London to Ireland. 3 days later, it was returned, having fallen foul of customs, but with no explanation, despite numerous attempts. You just can't get your money back either. At least you got it back 3 days later. Mine took a month. So it's nearly there, isn't it? It's better than the last time. Not as good as the next time. So an old mate of mine always says that. He goes, how are you feeling? He says, what does he say? Better than yesterday, worse than tomorrow. I can feel it. The old feeling of facts versus feelings, and that primacy of expertise, the comfortable knowledge that however long it takes, eventually the truth will out. It's traditional to quote George Orwell at this point. There is truth and there is untruth. If you can hold on to the truth, even if you are the only one, you will not go mad. And the Brexit truth is beginning to coalesce, but not enough for the governor of the Bank of England to say, of course I'm not neutral. Don't be ridiculous. That would be like asking me to go to a firefighters convention and not mention water. Thank you to Lee, I think, who sent in that analogy. Big fan of analogies. Keep them coming. 84850. Or of course, on Blue Sky, where I am Mr. James O.B. on Blue Sky, a new social media platform that put on 1 million new followers yesterday. Only some of them as a consequence of this programme. Not me 1 million, the whole platform put on 1 million. I want to play you a clip. Before we go to Alan and then to Kevin, I want to play you a clip from last night's Question Time, featuring one of the regular contributors, for which we are very grateful, one of the regular contributors to Unhinged Headlines, which means, of course, that he is a comment writer on the Daily Telegraph and a big Brexit cheerleader, like all the comment writers on the Daily Telegraph. And just thinking about the extraordinary zeitgeist we created, whereby people who knew what they were talking about, stone cold experts, right, would somehow be offered up as yin to the yang of stone cold idiots. I was sent this clip last night by someone who just put at the top of it, Pascal Lamy versus Andrea Leadsom Mark II. This isn't actually about Brexit, but it highlights what we've become as a country, where even Question Time, which used to be such a hallowed platform for intellectual exchange and proper political debate, now puts up someone who runs an actual energy company against someone who writes twaddle for money in the Daily Telegraph. And occasionally, I suppose you have to be honest about this, occasionally magic happens. So this is, what's the name of the guy, the cool guy that runs Octopus Energy? I'm a big fan of Greg Jackson, a straight talker. So Greg Jackson runs Octopus Energy. I'm not going to tell you any more about him because he'll tell you himself in a minute. Tim Stanley writes for the Daily Telegraph comment pages and runs nothing. But which one do you think Tim Stanley considers to be the expert on energy policy?
This country, when you have a period like we've recently had, where the wind dies and where the sun doesn't shine, what happens? You have to rely upon backup generation, which, by the way, is becoming harder to do because we've shut down coal. So what do? You rely on gas. Well, we're making that harder to do because we don't like exploration in the North Sea. So what do? You import the power from overseas.
Allow me to help you with this answer.
There is one solution to this, which is nuclear, and the very same green people who are demanding...
You are going to get a word in at some point.
As somebody who buys more power than anybody in the UK, I can give you an authoritative answer on what we do. So the reality is, first of all, an electric car holds enough power in its battery for a typical house for the best part of a week. As more and more electric cars hit our roads, we have distributed storage of electricity that will get us through days on end without wind, right? It's not the whole solution, but it's a big part of it. And it helps us reduce our reliance on things like those fossil fuel backups. We're building more interconnectors. It's always windy somewhere. It's always sunny somewhere. So as we connect our country to others, when they're windy, we get their power. When we're windy, we sell ours to them. And by the way, we're one of the windiest places in the world. This is a huge export opportunity for the UK.
Greg Jackson there, who runs Octopus Energy, compelled to, in Brexit Britain, debate as an equal an idiot from the Daily Telegraph who hasn't got the first idea what he's talking about. And he'll be back on next week probably, wanging on about, I don't know, some other area of importance which he knows absolutely nothing about, but has somehow been persuaded that he knows more than the experts do. If you don't know what the Pascal Lamy, Andrea Leadsom reference is, just Google it. Stick my name there as well. Pascal Lamy, Andrea Leadsom, James O'Brien. And you may need some help getting your eyes back off the stalks that they'll end up on. 10:38 is the time. Alan is in Manchester. Andrew Bailey, Alan, what's going on?
I was saying to producer, I think he's dead right to mention Brexit because, the Bank of England is partly responsible for the economy. And the thing is, what the danger, James, is with a protectionist, isolationist America, there'll be trade wars, and we will be stuck right in the middle of the EU and America, and, our economy will suffer. And that's why we need to reset relations. But I don't know how they're going to do it because I've been on before. I'm a Labour councillor in Greater Manchester. I mean, sometimes Brexit, it's like Voldemort in Harry Potter. You don't mention it.
You're right.
And I wish sometimes that Keir...
And the weirdest thing is that, of course, Voldemort's supporters, just to perhaps stretch your analogy a little too far, Alan, Voldemort's supporters loved talking about him in private and even in public. And the more powerful Voldemort became, the more empowered they were to say the name of he who must not be named. But what's extraordinary about Brexit is that the cheerleaders for it, the supporters of it, the believers in it, constantly insist everyone else has to shut up about it. Just while you were talking, Martin, who describes himself as being in South Bristol, got in touch to say, have you not discussed and attacked Brexit enough? There was a vote in 2016. The majority voted to leave. And ever since that referendum, you keep banging on about the result you so dislike. Enough already. What other point in human history have the winners wanted everyone to shut up about it before the ink was even dry upon the victory contract? It's extraordinary, isn't it? But it's not. Yeah. It's not the mention of Brexit I'm asking about. It's the insistence that he has to be neutral. How do you feel about that? Because that seems to me to be nuts now.
Well, no, because at the end of the day, it has cost us 4% of our GDP. It's cost us 15% of our trade. It's costing us, I think, according to Bloomberg, $40 billion a year. So if that's affecting the economy, and we've just raised taxes, we've had to raise taxes to fill the black hole. But would we have needed to do that if we were still in the EU? So it's dead right to mention that. And
but how can he be neutral then?
Well, the thing is, he's got to be professional.
Well, he's got to say, what other line of work would you be? Someone takes a car into your garage and you say, well, it needs a new engine, it needs a new back wheel, it needs a new windscreen wiper. I think I might replace the radio. But by the way, I'm going to be neutral on whether it's running well or not.
Well, it's like James. It's like a doctor saying to you, well, I'm not going to give you a full diagnosis, which is bad because you might not really like to hear about it, mate.
Do you think that's what he's doing? You think he's sugaring the pill for the headbangers?
I think
that's generous,
man. To be fair,
that's generous. I think he's just terrified of the Daily Mail still.
Well, I think what he's doing, there might be the first step in actually the bank becoming more, say, hawkish over Brexit. But I tell you what, I wish my party would do, James. I wish Keir or Rachel would go right across that dispatch box and say, listen, this is your Brexit. Started by Cameron because we're scared to death of UKIP. Finished by Johnson. It's affected the country badly. Now, it's yours, and we're going to make you own that. And every time we mention the economy, say, it's your Brexit. It's a Tory Brexit aided by the Riotmeister.
The Riotmeister. I haven't heard that one before. 10:41 is the time. 5%, according to Goldman Sachs, the estimates of how much the UK economy has been hit. It grew 5% less over the past 8 years. This was in 2024 of this year, than other comparable countries. And what I found extraordinary about that when it was first released was that Rishi Sunak completely ignored it. And Rishi Sunak's fortune was built in large part upon his tenure as a Goldman Sachs analyst. So he knows how important Goldman Sachs forecasts are. And yet, do you remember, he did that graph of the things that were affecting the UK economy and he didn't put Brexit on it. Listen, how many Martins in South Bristol are there sitting there now going, shut up about it? Because that's treachery. That's treason. The country's facing an enormous threat, albeit self-inflicted. And you think talking about the importance of fixing it is bad. It's disgusting, that. It's probably the single worst example of unpatriotic conduct that I've encountered in my lifetime. Saying that you shouldn't talk about damage that's been done to your country because you're one of the people responsible for the damage. But thank you for listening. Kevin's in Clacton. Kevin, that's Riotmeister country. What would you like to say? I think he's fallen asleep or died of boredom. It's 10:42. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Should we give Kevin another go, or should we go to Cormac in Kennington? Cormac, what would you like to say?
James, hi.
Thank goodness the phones are working.
James, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Carry on.
Yeah, sorry. I'm getting out of my Ukraine lane today, just to remind you what I normally talk about.
Good man.
Look, I want to try and defend Andrew Bailey somewhat.
Okay.
And it's on the basis, look, I was a senior local government officer and then a senior civil servant for almost 20 years. And as such, I was politically restricted, which meant not only could I not be a member of or campaign for a political party, I had to be very, very careful what I said, both in my professional job and even outside work. I could not say anything that might be politically controversial. I was employed to support the policy of the government of the day. Now, I think Andrew Bailey, ultimately, as a very senior civil public servant, is in the same bracket. He has gone very far in that he has made it very clear that Brexit is damaging the British economy. But I think he has to thread a very, very fine line. And my sense at the moment is that he's staying just the right side of that line, while letting us know, the authority that he is, that Brexit is harming us.
So, so this is diplomacy in action then, in a way, albeit on the domestic stage rather than the international one. He's saying that it's bad, while also saying that I don't have an opinion on it.
I think he has to do that, James. But I think he has already, for anybody who wants to listen to what the man has said, he has come out and he has told us very clearly how much it's damaging the British economy and how much it's damaging the city.
What about the second element of today's question, which is the plausibility of there being things that can be done to repair some of the damage without undoing any of the things that have been done since 2016? Because I wish I believed a little bit more in that.
Right. Okay, James, this is what made me jump up and down and say I really want to talk to James on this. It's delusional. Right?
Yeah,
it is pragmatic to say that we must, and we must, especially with the world in the shape that it's in now and Donald Trump, we must rebuild stronger ties with Europe. But it's every negotiation is give and take. And we are going to be fiddling around the edges. The idea that we will get more from Europe because we are nicer, sorry, not we, that Labour will get more from Europe because they're nicer than the Tories is for the birds.
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't.
It's give and take.
I understand that. And I was a bit thick last week. I indulged in a little bit, would you believe, of kind of Little Britanism myself. I'm always conscious of we're all susceptible to these kind of jingoistic swells of the chest, because I was sitting here saying, why is Keir Starmer the first Prime Minister since Churchill to go to France on Remembrance Day? I was talking about it from an entirely Anglo-centric perspective. You as an Irishman would appreciate how damaging Anglo-centrism can be, because of course the reason why Keir Starmer was the first British Prime Minister to commemorate the Second World War in France was because this is the first time he'd been invited. He was the first British Prime Minister to be it's in the gift of the French. It's not the British Prime Minister sitting in Downing Street going, well, shall I pop to France tomorrow to mark Remembrance Sunday, to mark Armistice? You wait to see whether you get invited or not. So the invitation came, and then you make the decision. So there is change. There is room for niceness. The fact that Macron and Starmer stood there together at a time when Germany's in all sorts of difficulties is significant. But you're right, it's delusional to think it translates into making Constantine's life easier as a logistics expert trying to get goods in and out of Europe.
James, could I say one thing?
Of course you can.
And again, I was obviously a very, very little man compared to Keir Starmer, but I was a senior civil servant and a senior diplomat for a short period of time when I was in Ukraine. Going to meetings and embassy receptions and having meetings and glad handing, that's the easy part.
Yes.
It's what you do to follow up on that when you make the hard decisions and the hard concessions. And I cannot see that, the only thing that's going to help fix our economy and, 5% growth over 8 years Some estimates £2 billion a week, not 350 million on the side of the bus, by the way. £2 billion its cost. The only things that are going to address that is re-entering the customs union and the single market with our largest trader. It is delusional to talk about trade deals with faraway small lands. Trade is gravitational. What part of that do people not understand?
Well, actually, I think you'll find it's you and me that don't understand, because this text has come in and it says O'Brien, to which we can add Smith. You still don't get it. It's not about prosperity, which is an extraordinary position to take, having listened to 45 minutes of discussion about the governor of the Bank of England. And to conclude that the conversation is not about prosperity, or that Brexit wasn't about prosperity. What was it about? 3-pin plugs and wrapping your fish and chips in old newspapers. What was it about? Them needing us more than we needed them. The German car industry. It's been a while, eh? This must be what a singer feels like when they've got a sort of song that was such a big smash that they became entirely associated with it. So they stopped doing it at concerts. And the crowd didn't like it. It'd be like Chesney Hawkes not singing The One and Only, or Tom Jones not doing Delilah. Do you remember I used to be able to do that without even pausing for breath? They need us more than we need them. The German car industry is going to come to the rescue of us. We'll be in Berlin the day after the Brexit vote. Negotiate. David Davis demonstrating a level of ignorance about what leaving the European Union would mean that makes Tim Stanley look like a genius. And what did Theresa May do? Put him in charge of Brexit. A bit like asking a bloke who's just dismantled your car and failed to put it back together again to go and run a Formula One team as an engineer. Anyway, it's 10:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
52 is the time. I sometimes get brought up a little bit short by things when my personal life clashes with my professional life. So I was talking to you last week about one of my dearest friends, no longer with us, and his relationship with exam results, because his A-level results completely changed his life. And I was talking about him and inevitably allowing myself a bit of emotion. And then just during the 1:15 break, I got a message off his widow saying that we're listening today. and it, obviously was quite special. On a much less special note, I got my friend's catchphrase wrong, and he's been in touch to correct me, so he's listening as well. The phrase is, I'm worse than yesterday but better than tomorrow. Hey, I got that wrong. It's like it's the pessimist's mantra, isn't it? Worse than yesterday, better than tomorrow. My life is lived on a permanent decline. Speaking of declines, Donald Trump has now appointed his Secretary of State for Health. I'm going to play a little game with him in a moment, or with you in a moment, about him. But now that it's 10:53, you can book your place on the switchboard to ask the Mayor of London a question. And remember, you can ask him anything you want, absolutely anything you want. The number you need remains 0345 6060 973. It's the first time he's been in the studio since it can't be since the general election. Is it since the general election? It's certainly since Donald Trump was elected President of the United States of America. And I will have a question to ask him about the conversation that we're in the middle of at the moment with regards to Andrew Bailey and the Brexit reality that he's still a little bit frightened of acknowledging. But before that, and get in touch, 0345 6060 973, if you would like to ask the Mayor of London a question. Before that, staying in London, residents living on a housing estate in central London, once named Britain's best, have told LBC that the reality is their flats are uninhabitable. They've accused Westminster Council of failing to deal with persistent water leaks, mould, and I have a big fear about the role that mould plays in public health, and ceilings that keep falling down. You could always look at a ceiling, couldn't you? And you could say you've got one job, and that is to not fall down. But on the Lillington Gardens estate in Pimlico, as Fraser Knight reports, they do.
Boiling hot water poured its way through this block of flats 3 weeks ago, flooding homes and collapsing ceilings.
Everything in here is a mess because my sofa got destroyed.
And it's not the first time it's happened either.
It's happened to the ceiling here about 6 times.
6 times?
Yeah. It starts off with a leak, and then eventually the water spreads across, and then eventually the ceiling comes down. They've come in, they've repainted, put the ceiling back up, and this is what happens every year.
Lillington Gardens in Pimlico was once named Britain's best council estate and even won awards for its design, with its shared balconies and gardens and its location in central London. But behind the flat doors, residents like Andy tell me they're living in a nightmare, and Westminster Council is being blamed.
The mould spores, my son every 5 minutes, he's off school sick, eye infections, nosebleeds. It's just ongoing, and it's like, what has to happen for them to recognise that the flat is not habitable? It's like, what are you waiting for someone in here to die? I'm caring for 2 kids with disabilities.
Persistent leaks, black mould and collapsing ceilings are plaguing this estate, with problems in almost every block. Have you had any contact with London Fire Brigade?
They are sick of coming to our estate because...
Ernest Strafford from the Residents Association showed me around some of the other blocks on the estate, where I understand the London Fire Brigade has been called to more than 40 times this year, to automatic alarms going off, people being stuck in lifts, and multiple floods. We stopped to look at the aftermath of last month's flood in the community centre.
2 weeks ago, it was just steaming, boiling hot water pouring through here, literally from other people's homes, just pouring. It flooded the toilets as well. So you've got dangling cables.
Did the whole ceiling come down here?
Yeah, it just felt chaotic rather than managed. People, contractors arriving, didn't know where the valves were.
The estate here is now part social housing and part private housing, but the blocks are still owned by Westminster Council. Now, they say they are aware of the ongoing leaks, which have been caused by an ageing communal heating system which needs to be replaced. But while the residents wait for that, the leaks and the nightmares go on.
10:57 is the time, something that we can, of course, ask the Mayor of London about shortly, but we can ask him anything you want us to. And if you want to get your question on the board, put it to him yourself, then 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I've got actually rather more that I'd like to ask him myself than I usually do, but I'd want to hold fire until I'd rather you ask the questions on some of the subjects that may have been at the forefront of the news in recent weeks and months, particularly pertinent to his purview. So if you do want to get involved quickly, and then you can ask the question and I won't have to, which means win-win. You hear less of my voice. And what's not to like? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need if you want to get your question in front of the Mayor of London. I'll close with a comment from another Governor of the Bank of England. This, in some ways, there are 2 lodestars here. The current Governor of the Bank of England, who says, I must be neutral on Brexit, which is a little bit disingenuous, despite Cormac's rather helpful explanation of the importance of diplomacy in these roles. He kind of got the job because he was perceived as being in favour of it. So now he's saying it's all going very badly, but I must retain a neutral position. Mark Carney, who of course was Governor of the Bank of England when it happened, talking about American politics, wrote recently, I know this from my time in the UK, where for years the rallying cry of Brexiters was broken Britain, and their solution was to take back control, when it was actually code for tear down your future. So while Brexiters promised that they were going to create Singapore on the Thames, the Truss government actually delivered Argentina on the channels. When politicians claim our great democracies are broken, it's not because they want to fix them, it's because they want a license to demolish. And it's a model that's been used time and time again. That's a warning about what might be happening in America in the event of a Trump presidency. And as we'll discuss after Speak to Sadie, Donald Trump is, I think, fulfilling all of Mark Carney's prophecies and then some.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 11 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, joined by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, for the first time in a while.
Good morning. Good to be back. I just wanted to make sure you were still the most popular programme on LBC before I came back. And on average, 1.5 million listeners.
Stop it.
You got me back?
Stop it. I've got 3 things on my list that you could probably predict, but I'll wait and see whether callers pick up on some of them first. This is the first time that we have seen you since Donald Trump became President of the United States of America. I think it's fair to say that you two have beef.
Well, look, firstly, it's really important when I say this because I abide by the rules of the game. Donald Trump has won the election. He's going to be the president in January, and I wish him well. I congratulate him on winning the election. But clearly, We know from his record when he was president between 2016 and 2020, and also some of the things he's campaigned on. There are anxieties that Londoners have, which my job as the mayor is to articulate those.
It's sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist. You've returned to that accusation that you made previously. What does that achieve?
Well, no, listen, it's really important that we put out a hand of friendship to President-elect Trump. I wish him well.
You can't have it both ways. You can't call his policies sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic and racist and put out a hand of friendship at the same time.
Well,
or do you think you can?
I think the three things that even Donald Trump supporters would agree with is his policies are protectionist, nativist and unilateralist. I think that poses problems, not just for our great country and the world, but also for London. Now, look, I want our government and our country to continue to have a special relationship with, President Trump and the USA. One of the joys about a special relationship is like having a best mate. Our expectations are more for a best mate, our closest ally, than they are of others. And that means sometimes calling out your best mate or your closest ally when you think they're doing things you disagree with.
And yet your friends and colleagues in the cabinet have backpedalled pretty violently. So, I mean, to be clear, you reiterate your accusations, even though you now seek to dilute them by using words like nativist and unilateralist instead of words like sexist and racist. But people like David Lammy and to a lesser extent, because he wasn't as outspoken in the first place, Keir Starmer, are swimming in the opposite direction from you?
As indeed is the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance.
Yes.
And
who suggested that Trump might turn out to be America's Hitler, for people who aren't aware of what you're referring to.
Well, in 2016, J.D. Vance was an ally of mine speaking out against some of Trump's anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Yes,
Elon Musk, of course, famously as the government efficiency member of Donald Trump's cabinet, was criticising Donald Trump for his views on climate in 2017 when Donald Trump as president walked away from the Paris Accord. Now, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk and others may have changed their mind about Trump. I haven't, but I'm giving President Trump-elect the benefit of the doubt. And let's hope, fingers crossed, this president during this term is different from the last one.
So do you think that people like David Lammy and Keir Starmer should be a little bit closer to your position, the importance of, you've described it as speaking truth with power, using the platform to explain that actually the policies will have an impact on us, positive and negative, or do you think that they're sort of diplomatically handcuffed towards paying a form of homage to the incoming president?
Look, the job of the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary is different to my job as the Mayor of
very
London. They're different, right?
Yeah.
I understand the importance of trade with America. I'm somebody who loves America. I've got family in America, loves American politics, American culture, American music. But look, the old saying, when America sneezes, we catch a cold. America is the one remaining superpower. What America says and does matters. It matters to us for a variety of reasons. Of course, it matters because of Ukraine. It matters because of what's happening in the Middle East. It matters because of our commitment to NATO. It matters because of the impact on climate change. It matters on the impact it has on minority communities, on women and the like. And one of the things that Londoners want their mayor to do is to speak up for them. And I will continue to speak up for them, even if it means sometimes criticising our closest ally.
Let's move on to Mark Rowley's comments in the aftermath of the acquittal of the police officer accused of murdering Chris Cabba. He spoke of those in positions of authority fueling a dangerous narrative, talked about focus on Mr. Cabba's ethnicity, creating rumour and innuendo which could embolden those who work against the public. Was he talking about you?
Well, he's not raised it with me, so I'm assuming he's not talking about me. Otherwise,
that description fits you, doesn't it?
Well,
you were quick to express sympathy with Chris Cabba's family, and I don't think so far have expressed any sympathy with the police officers.
Well, let me do
situation or family.
So let me deal with that head on.
Okay.
I'm sure nobody would give any equivalence to somebody losing their life and somebody being charged with a criminal offence. They're very different things. I do sympathise with Chris Cabba's family, friends and the community for the loss of Chris Cabba's life. It is right and proper that even officers who face the most extraordinary circumstances, the unique set of circumstances that firearms officers have to go through, also have a system of checks and balances. Now, in this particular case, the IOPC, the police watchdog, investigated this matter. They passed a file on to the Crown Prosecution Service. They decided to charge NX121 with a criminal offence. The judge decided to remove the anonymity of NX121, and a jury acquitted this police officer, and we should respect that verdict. I'm concerned about the system of accountability of firearms officers. They suffer unique consequences of doing their job, and that's why I support this Home Secretary. Previous 5 have promised it and not done it, who's going to review the system of accountability so an officer can keep the anonymity, and it's only removed if they're found guilty, but also the threshold before the IOP sends a file to the CPS will also be changed. So I fully support those changes.
Shouldn't you thank the officer concerned for protecting his colleagues and potentially the public from the danger that Cobber posed that night?
I'm always thanking officers on a daily basis.
Right, but you haven't thanked him personally.
Look, I thank firearms officers all the day. My very
you
first
haven't
visit.
Thanked him personally.
Well,
you can imagine what him and his family have been through.
There's going to be an inquest, and I respect the judicial process, which I think we should all do in relation to both the inquest.
And there's been an acquittal.
And in the criminal trial.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things that still to happen, and I think it's really important that your listeners appreciate this. There is still going to be an IBC investigation, and there's still going to be an inquest. Of course, I welcome the verdict of the jury. I also recognise, because the very first visit I did as mayor was to visit firearms officers because of the really difficult job they do, extraordinary job they do, making split-second decisions. They receive the best possible training they can, and they deserve our support. And that's one of the reasons I'm welcoming this Home Secretary's review of how those officers are held to account, because they need to have the confidence of knowing when they make that split-second decision, they'll be supported and not thrown under a bus.
Well, on the anonymity issue, would you have held that view when you were a lawyer?
Up until a guilty verdict. So I had cases when officers had their anonymity preserved during the inquest process, and it's important why.
But not in a criminal case?
Until they're found guilty. Let me explain why. This particular case is a good case study, actually, in what can happen. So what happened in this case, and I'm not breaching confidences because it's been reported, is a bounty was put out on this officer, and that's why I still want to call him NX121. A bounty was put on his head. And so he and his family had to move their home because of the bounty put on his head. And that's why it's important for these officers who, by the way, very uniquely take out their gun and even more uniquely and rarely use it, should have the anonymity until and only if, they're found guilty after a proper trial in a criminal court.
So when due process is complete, when the inquest is complete, when the all of the investigations have been concluded, and I know it's a hypothetical, but I think it's a reasonable one to put to you, if they arrive at the same conclusions that the criminal case arrived at, do you feel any personal responsibility to this officer to not apologise, because as you've explained, the importance of due process as the law stood and stands at the time is important, but more an expression of gratitude to him?
Absolutely.
You will. You'll meet with him and say thank you.
I'll thank you today. I want to thank NX121 and all the other firearms officers for the incredible job they do. I'm not sure if your listeners appreciate the training they go through to become a firearms officer. The number of times during the course of the day we call them out, whether it's NX121 or their officers, they do an incredible job every single day responding to complaints and threats being made around armed robberies, around kidnappings and so forth. And this officer will have on many occasions gone out not knowing what's going to confront him when he reaches there. And, so I want to thank not just him, but all the other officers who do this on a daily basis. By the way, they don't get paid extra for doing this.
No.
So this is they volunteer to be trained to do this, and then they do this on a daily basis, knowing the scrutiny they'll come under if, God forbid, somebody takes out their gun and somebody loses their life. So of course I thank this officer for doing that. My point is, it's really important to understand that somebody has lost their life, and when there's somebody who loses their life after being in contact with the police, we've got to have a system of proper scrutiny and accountability.
Will you ask Mark Rowley if he was talking about you next time you see him?
Well, I see him almost on a daily basis speak to him. He's not mentioned it to me so far.
Will you ask him?
Not really, no. We've got more important things to discuss.
Shall we take a call?
Absolutely. Good morning, London, and those listening across the country. The first caller, I hope, if the system works, is from Manor House, and it's Andy. Good morning, Andy.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Khan. Just a simple question. You thank the officer, but will you apologise to the officer on the Carver shooting case? And I believe he needs an apology from you and the government too. Just
remind me, Andy, what's the apology for?
Well, to apologise for him being named publicly.
So, Andy, listen, so what happened is the judge chose in the criminal trial where he was acquitted. The judge heard the evidence. He heard submissions from the CPS. He had submissions from NX121's lawyer, and after hearing the evidence and the submissions and the arguments, the judge reached a decision that he should be named. And I didn't hear the evidence or the submissions or the arguments, so I'm not going to criticise a judge who reached that conclusion.
Yeah, but you spoke publicly about it, though, didn't you?
About supporting the judge.
Well, about him as well. I mean, it's unfair for him to be named. I mean, I feel sorry for the family of Mr. Carver, but he was a criminal.
Yeah, so
he was a killer. So, and all that, everything that the police officer had to go through for a criminal, it's unfair. It's really unfair, and nothing came out about Mr. Carver of what he did.
Well, that. To be fair, Andy, is the nature of the law. That's how the legal system operates. And the decision to name the officer was entirely in the gift of the judge and the judge alone. And the mayor has expressed gratitude to the officer concerned.
Wouldn't you want a system where, rather than me deciding whether the officer is named or the commissioner or the family, we have a process that's open. We have open justice where, in a court of law, an impartial judge hears the arguments and reaches a conclusion. And by the way, the officer then has an opportunity to appeal that decision to a higher court. Surely that's a better system of doing stuff, Andy, than you or I or the commissioner or somebody else deciding.
In my opinion, it's unfair to name the officer.
But you agree about
in this case.
You're in favour of anonymity being extended.
Absolutely, Andy. So what I'm supporting is the new Home Secretary, and by the way, I've had 5 of them since 2016. They've all promised this, no one's delivered. The new Home Secretary is going to change the rules, and so in the future, God forbid if there's another case, an officer will not have their name put in the public domain, even if a judge wants to, and the only time that would happen in the future is if a police officer is found guilty of such an offence, and only then would they be named.
It's 11:15. Andy, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
We shall see whether or not the Home Secretary moves on that as quickly as you.
It's important because I tell you why. Because other officers are feeling anxious now and nervous because.
Is it true that they're handing in their guns? Are we worried that there won't be enough armed officers available?
So what happened was at the time when, and it's this again, I'm not breaching confidences. This is in the public domain. At the time when NX121 was charged, a number of officers, their families, it's the officers' families were saying, listen, I'm not sure we should be doing this job. The stress and anxiety, we've seen what's happened to his family. We'd rather you didn't do this job. And so a number of officers, thought about that and handed their tickets in. What's really important is that we need these officers who keep our city safe on a daily basis and stuff. And so what we can't afford to happen is for either the public or officers not to have confidence in the system of accountability, and that's why I fully support Yvette Cooper's review of this process.
Okay. Did you welcome the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury this week?
I do. And it's really important, with your permission, that we start with the victims.
Of course.
Because they're often forgotten in these discussions because obviously it's the Archbishop and he's famous and he's the Archbishop. But what's clear is that many people suffered at the hands of this man. The Archbishop knew about it. And you know far better than I do the history of secrecy, the history of people, inverted commas, getting away with it. And I think when you know somebody's acting in a way that's improper, you've got a responsibility to act on that. And I think silence, acquiescence is not acceptable.
Back to the phones.
The next caller, I hope, is from my part of London, Wandsworth Common. It's Alan in South London. Hi, Alan. Good morning.
Hi there. Good morning. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I actually live quite close to the Henry Prince estate, I believe, where you grew up.
All the best people did, Alan. All the best people did.
Yeah, good. My question for you is on social housing, which I'm sure you're inundated with all the time. Just a bit of background. I've lived in London my whole entire life. My family have lived in London as long as I can remember, and none of us own our own properties. We've never been fortunate enough to be able to own our property. So I come from a very, very long list of council tenants. Now, I'm 36 years old. I still currently live at home with my mum and dad. And when I was 21, my parents recommended that I put my name on the housing register to see about trying to get my own place because they knew how hard it would be for me to try and buy somewhere in London. And it's only just got harder and harder with each year. Now I've tried to buy, but my finances go up and down because I'm self-employed. So money fluctuates. I have quiet times of the year where business isn't as good. And I've been on that council list for 15 years, and I'm not even any closer to having just a one-bedroom anything in London. And I still live at home with my parents at the age of 36. And my worry is, which I found out quite recently, that heaven forbid if anything was to happen to my mum and dad, if they was to both tragically, I don't know, pass away in a car crash or something where they were together, there's no right to succession for people who live in council homes in Wandsworth anymore. So I would have 4 weeks to pack up my whole entire life and try and find my own place. And that absolutely terrifies me. I don't know what my options are. I don't know what I can do. I feel like my life hasn't really started yet properly as an adult because I still live under my parents' roof, which I love. We get on very well, thankfully, but it could be so much worse. And I know there's so many other people, a lot of my friends still live at home with their parents. They can't get on the housing list. None of us can get our own places without having to pay landlords super high rent.
There are people listening to this now, listening to your testimony, actually, screaming at the radio because that's them. The number of people I meet in London, aged between 20 and 40, who are exactly in your position. Now, I'll try and give a shorter answer as I can, but basically the supply of affordable homes in London over successive decades has not met with the demand. That's one problem. Second problem is actually those social housing homes we do have, we've sold 6 times as many off and only built one in substitute for the 6th. So our social housing stock hasn't been replenished under right to buy. And so there are fewer and fewer social homes for people like you to get, which means you can be on the waiting list basically your entire lifetime and not get to the front of the queue because the number of homes being built historically has not got up with demand. So that's the problem. You want to know the solution. And the solution is to, frankly speaking, build far more homes, but importantly, far more affordable homes that people can afford to live in. Because you'll know, near the Henry Prince Estate, there's the old former Wandle Primary School, which is now luxury flats, which people like you can't afford to buy because that school was sold off for luxury flats. So the good news, we've got a change in government. They're committed to building record numbers of homes.
It's too late for Alan, though, isn't it?
Well, we've got to start somewhere. So they're going to build, their target is 1.5 million homes. I'm negotiating with the government to try and get a big chunk of those homes in London. They've got to be homes that people like you can afford to live in, not just council homes because you may earn a bit too much to be eligible for a council home, but also homes where you pay what's called
also being single is a big obstacle, isn't it?
The way it works, James, is councils give points depending on your circumstances, and it leads to what's called housing need. And if you're a single person working, the argument
with
goes,
a home,
with the roof over your head, you're not homeless, you're not a rough sleeper, you could be sofa surfing. The argument is you could go to a private landlord. Alan's problem is if he goes to a private landlord, he'll never save the money for a deposit, which he'll need to buy a home.
When did the rules on succession change?
So let me come to that. So on that, Alan, the issue is to make sure, God forbid, if your parents were involved in an accident where they both passed away at the same time, if your name's on the tenancy, you're secure. There's no succession of tenancy. A family doesn't get tenancy for life in terms of children and but unless you're a dependent. So what you can do is, you get legal advice and see if you can get your name on the tenancy with your mum and dad. That way, God forbid, if something happened to them, you'd still be a tenant. But obviously, the council assesses their needs rather than your needs. So you have to get advice in relation to whether you can do that. But you're spot on in relation to the policies of some councils, which is that tenancy doesn't pass to grown children who aren't dependents for obvious reasons, because there may be another family on the housing waiting list who've waited a number of years who may be eligible for the home that your parents would vacate.
Is that true everywhere? Is that true in all local authorities?
I'm not sure the policy in councils outside London, but that is the policy in most councils in London, yeah.
Not great news then, Alan, really?
No, and like I say, I mean, you're lucky that you can put money aside for a deposit living with your parents to be able to get on the housing ladder, because I know your aspiration probably is to be a homeowner. If you can't get a council tenancy in the short to medium term, I've got to be honest with you, the bad news is, we're facing a perfect storm: high interest rates, low growth, the impact of Brexit, construction inflation, which means that the number of homes being built, as James alluded to, is nowhere near enough to meet your immediate needs. So it's a big challenge for your generation. And I'm afraid what that's leading to is many people of your age leaving London, which is just a brain drain for our city, which is just not good enough.
Sure. Okay, so it's not the best news, but but also, that's the thing. I don't want to leave London. This is where my friends are, my life, my family, and it sucks. It's rubbish. It really is rubbish. It's not good enough.
I think this
is not any one person's fault.
This is the number one issue facing our city. If you said to me, what is the number one crisis our city faces, it's housing, a lack of affordable housing. It's a big problem for us. And that's why I welcome the steps that Angela Rayner has announced so far. I'm hoping the spending review in spring has some really good news for us.
Alan, take care, mate. And call in again if things improve. Let us know. I want to draw your attention next, Sadiq Khan, to social housing that already exists. Fraser Knight's harrowing report just before you came into the studio about collapsing ceilings, black mould. London Fire Brigade confirming to LBC that they've raised concerns with the local authority, in this case Westminster, about safety issues. The estate was only built in the 60s and 70s. It's a mix of social and private housing in Pimlico, owned by Westminster City Council, which is obviously going to be relevant to your answer. But how can this happen in the so-called sixth largest economy in the world?
Well, just worth reminding your listeners, and Fraser's report didn't mention this, but, in Rochdale a couple of years ago, a 2-year-old child, Awab Ishaq, lost his life as a consequence of breathing in the stuff that mould and damp produces. So this is dangerous. This is threatening to people's lives and stuff. That's why it's really important that Fraser's highlighted this issue of damp and mould. So the bad news is over the last 14 years, what councils haven't been able to do is get money to bring up these homes to what's called decent standard. What happened in the previous 13 years was the government gave councils money to improve the quality of accommodation, to address the issue of damp and mould and other issues, single glazing, so forth. And what you're seeing in Pimlico, I'm afraid, is replicated across nearly every borough in London and across the country.
Westminster is one of the richest boroughs in London, isn't it?
The reserves are pretty healthy, yes. But it's the legacy of years of not investing in stuff. And so over a number of years, this housing estate, the investment it's needed, is complicated by the fact that a number of people who live there are what's called leaseholders. And so what happens is if there's a bill that the council has to do the remedial work, let's say for argument's sake it's £10 million, that bill is prorated between the council paying some of it and leaseholders paying some of it, and what's called service charges and other things. And that can complicate the repair work we've done. It's no excuse. I'm just trying to explain the challenge that councils have. So my understanding from Fraser's report is that the council are now taking action. I suspect the remedial work won't happen immediately because of other obligations the council have.
It's been there 2 years. It's a Labour-run council. If it was still in the hands of the Conservatives, I suspect that your tone would be a little bit more robust.
But let's be frank. Look, no one council in 2 years, no one government in one budget is going to fix the problems of 14 years. The Labour government between 1997 and 2010 were criticised for not building enough council homes. Maybe fair enough, but a lot of their money was spent on bringing homes up to decent standards, including homes in Westminster. Westminster Council does have healthy reserves, and so I'm hoping that the council will take action in relation to this matter. The bad news, though, is, James, this isn't just a problem unique to Westminster. If you were to encourage listeners to ring in about damp and mould in their estate, you'd get calls from all across London and all across the country. Awab Ishaq, the poor child who lost his life, was in Rochdale. And that's why it's really important, that there is no substitute for proper investment from the government. The council's got to deal with the issue of remediating homes because of this, addressing issues about new homes needing to be built, addressing issues like second staircases, issues post-Grenfell, address issues like cladding, issues arisen post-Grenfell, address issues like, heating and so forth because of climate change. So I understand the pressures councils are under, and that's why we'll be lobbying the government for more investment in the spring spending review.
Thank you. There's not a lot of solace there for the residents of that estate, is there? Any more than there was for Alan about
the good news from the housing team will know there's a problem of damp mould in property 246 Henry Prince Estate, and they can take action proactively before the mould spreads. A lot of this is about the design of the buildings. This isn't per se lifestyle choice, as some experts say. This is poor quality homes being built, not proper design, but also not proper maintenance. And that's why it's really important to address this issue, and that's why we're piloting these mould monitors.
Let's take another call. There's still time.
Great. The next caller is from Lewisham, I'm hoping. It's Oliver. Good morning, Oliver.
Good morning, James. Good morning, Mr. Khan. My question for you, Mr. Khan, is regarding crime. So I believe I'm correct in saying you entered the office of Mayor of London in 2016?
Yeah.
Yeah, so since 2016, crime in the capital has increased steadily by around 40 to 50,000 offences reported to the police each year. However, each year on year, every interview you do when you talk about crime, you talk about putting measures in place to reduce crime and additional funding to police and community activism to reduce the amount of crime there is within the capital. But since you've been the mayor, the crime has only increased. So my question to you is, have you lied to the people of London? And if you haven't, can you prove to us how you're going to prevent crime and bring the numbers down?
Oliver, thank you for your question. It's a cracking question, and I love your style of aggression. It's great. Let me deal with these issues. Look, in 2016, the year you asked me whether I was elected, do you think crime in 2016 was low?
No, as far as I'm aware, the statistics show it was around 500,000.
Right. So we accept in 2016 crime wasn't low. In fact, it had been going up since 2013, if we're going to go back in history. And so crime wasn't low in 2016. One of the reasons for that, without excusing criminality, was 6 years of cuts both in policing, but also in things that prevent people turning to crime. So youth clubs, youth workers, and so forth. So my inheritance wasn't great. What have I done since 2016? Dealing with your question head on. I've used council tax receipts and business rates receipts to invest in the police. So we funded from City Hall 1,300 more police officers. But also from City Hall, I've invested in youth workers and youth clubs and invested in young people. So the next question you'd ask, not unreasonably, is what's the consequence of that investment, notwithstanding the further cuts from the government from 2016 until 2024? Well, the consequence of that investment is homicide's gone down since 2016. Young people injured with a knife has gone down since 2016. Burglary's gone down since 2016. Gun crime has gone down since 2016. Lethal barrel discharge has gone down since 2016. If you compare per capita homicides in London versus New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Paris, Berlin, Madrid, it's gone down in London compared to those cities. We have fewer homicides per capita than those cities do, but it's still too high. It's still too high. And that's why, we're lobbying the government for more investment in police and young people, because, we've got to recognise that austerity has consequences. And one of those was crime going high. And we're going to carry on working with young people, being tough on the causes of crime, invested in the police, being tough on crime. And that's the only way at the end of the day to reduce crime.
It's interesting you say that, Mr. Khan, because the thing is, it's the same sort of rhetoric, if you will, or same things that you repeat.
It's not rhetoric. Just run through that list again of the crimes that you're talking about.
So, Oliver, let me give you...
Mr. Khan,
please carry on.
Since 2016, the statistics were 700,000 crimes reported to the police.
What can I do with stats?
It rose to 800,000 before 2019. 2019, 2020, it dove down to 700,000.
Sure.
And now, of the year 2023-24, it was 900,000 in a year, sir. That's unacceptable, completely unacceptable.
Sure. Well, hopefully that's the reason why you voted Labour on July the 4th, Oliver. So look, let me deal with the issue of stats, which you wanted to mention. So the Office for National Statistics, this ain't the Mayor's office, this ain't the Home Office, this ain't the police. The ONS says, in the most recent ONS report, you are least likely to be the victim of violence in London than anywhere else in the country.
But Oliver's talking about overall numbers. Hang on, because people are going to be confused by this. Just run through that list of things again that have gone down, if you would.
Let me finish.
Because he's including shoplifting.
So the ONS says you're less likely to be the victim of violence in London than the rest of the country. You're less likely to be injured because of violence in London than the rest of the country. Since 2016, homicide down, knife crime where you're under 25 and you're injured is down, burglary is down, gun crime is down, lethal barrel discharge is down. Now, I accept other crimes have gone up. Shoplifting has gone up. The LSE did a report, Oliver. The LSE said, as the cost of living crisis has got worse, acquisitive crime has got worse. shoplifting, robbery, thefts, burglary across the country. That's the LSE report, not Sadiq Khan, the London School of Economics. So, yeah, other crimes have gone up across the country, not surprisingly, including London, and that includes fraud as well. And that's one of the reasons why I'm quite clear. You've got to be tough on crime, invest in policing, support the police, and without in any way excusing criminality, be tough on the causes of crime, invest in young people. And by the way, I'm sorry to throw stats at you and reports, but you started it. The IFS this week, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, did a report this week that says there is a direct link between cuts in youth clubs and youth services to young people getting involved in crime and doing worse in GCSEs. So austerity had consequences.
Thank you, Oliver, what is Project Gladys?
Project Gladys. You may have caught me out there, but remind me.
According to the splendid new website, London Centric, run by the journalist Jim Waterson, Project Gladys was the code name given internally to the pay-per-mile scheme known as Next Generation Charging, which was a proposal that came as a consequence of a report commissioned by you. And the plan to charge drivers for every mile they travel on the capital's roads came incredibly close to being implemented.
Let's do it. So thank you for reminding me. I never heard of Project Gladys, by the way, but I know the policy you're talking about. So when Boris Johnson was mayor, he asked a team at TfL to look into the issue of paper miles, and I don't criticise him for doing so, because the Conservative government also looked into the paper mile scheme. In fact, when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, he was asking Treasury and colleagues to look into the issue of paper mile. And the reason why, so we're clear, the government's looking into paper mile, and the reason why the previous mayor had it in his transport strategy, which was also in my transport strategy, the government's reason was because as vehicle excise duty goes down, road tax goes down because people have more and more electric cars, they need a way to replenish the money they lose from not getting the road tax money they hitherto receive. Boris Johnson had it in his mayor's transport strategy, and so did I, because officials at TfL are looking into all sorts of innovation and new things that are either accepted or rejected by respective mayors. I've been quite clear. The world's biggest clean air zone has been hugely successful. As a consequence of facing huge opposition, introducing the world's largest clean air zone, we don't need paper mile in London. But I think governments of present and future will look into the issue of paper mile because they've got a big black hole in relation to road tax that may need to be filled in other ways.
So it's a possibility?
Not in London, it's not something I'm here.
Okay, which leads me to my next question. Is this your final term?
I've just only won 4 months ago.
Yeah, I know, but listen, normally your people are beating a path to our door to get you on the show, and this has been a long time coming. So it suggests to me that you're not in campaign mode, which you were in permanently for your first 2 terms.
Listen,
I'll offer you a bet then. This is your final term, isn't it?
I govern in poetry like a campaign. No prose here.
Oh, please. So yes.
Listen, I'm enjoying being the Mayor of London, and I'll carry on being the Mayor of London as long as Londoners lend me their support.
We began with Donald Trump and your willingness to diverge from the party line, as it were, the Labour Party line, a party that is, of course, now in government for the first time in your mayoralty. I want to return your attention next to the Middle East, where allegations of crimes against humanity were reported on this programme yesterday as a consequence of a report by Human Rights Watch. Elements of the British media seem to be more concerned with nurses wearing badges in hospitals than they do with hospitals being razed to the ground in Gaza. What's going on?
It's impossible to turn on the radio or TV or read a newspaper without being horrified by what you see in Gaza, in West Bank, and in Lebanon on a daily basis. Of course, our heart breaks for those who are victims of Hamas's terrorist act on October the 7th. We want those hostages returned. But I think it's really important that Netanyahu is stopped in relation to what he's doing in the West Bank and Gaza. In the end, the only way to stop the killing is a political solution. And it's really important, not just Prime Minister Keir Starmer, but President-elect Trump, President Biden, and others put pressure on all the parties, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, Netanyahu, to stop this killing.
What words would you use? Are you comfortable with the words ethnic cleansing?
Well, I think it's really important that we're temper in the language we use for obvious reasons, but the ICJ said plausible genocide, and you can understand why people feel strongly about this. Now, I'm trying to reduce temperatures. I'm trying to bring people together because I know, unfortunately, consequences of what's happened in the Middle East is leading to a rise in anti-Semitism, a rise in anti-Muslim hatred here. So, I'm trying to bring people together and avoid a situation where people feel it's permissible to attack somebody because they belong to the faith of Judaism.
You are not just people, though, are you? You were a human rights lawyer before becoming a politician, so presumably you know your way around the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Statute better than the average Joe.
And this is why we should respect what the ICJ judgment said. The phrase used, and I'm being deliberate in being careful here, is plausible genocide. And I made the point in relation to the caller who rang in relation to police officers facing horrible stress and pressure and eventually a criminal trial. The rule of law, due process should matter whether it's, in London, in the UK or internationally and stuff. And, the case that was brought by South Africa was a case that could have been thrown out of the court. It wasn't thrown out of the court. When you read what's happening in, Gaza and West Bank and Lebanon, it's not improved since then. It's got worse.
Thank you, Sadiq Khan. Before you go, people are unpersuaded by your use of statistics with regard to crime. Where can they do their own research? Where can they find the figures that you referred to?
So the figures that I referred to are both from the ONS and also from the Home Office. By the way, I'm not in any way trivialising the impact of crime. It has a huge impact on communities, individuals, shops. And we've got to bear down on this. I'm particularly concerned about knife-enabled robberies, traumatic for the victims. And we've got to do much more in that area. That's one of the reasons why I'm supporting the Commissioner in his efforts to take action in this area.
So what are you thinking of doing when you hang up your mayoral chains?
Well, listen, I might inherit the 1.5 million listeners if I play my cards right, I'm told.
Sadiq Khan,
always a pleasure.
It is. I think Suella Braverman's beating you to that punch. It's 11:41.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:45 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to an irregular feature on the programme, but one which I am keen to hear more of or do more of. I know what you're thinking. If you want to do more of something, James, then it is largely on you. But it's what we're going to call missed information, if we ever get around. I say we, if they ever get around to providing the most popular presenter on the whole station with something as simple and straightforward as a tiny little sting designed to accompany yet another of his brilliant ideas about how to meld news and entertainment in a way that Alan Partridge himself would be proud of. So I say we. But if they ever come up with an actual sting for it, then it will have an actual sting. And what it is a regular-ish attempt, to find the truth in stories that certain elements of the media, today we'll be looking at the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, used to try and whip up what I can only describe as ignorant anger. And that doesn't mean that people getting angry are ignorant. It means that the anger itself is ignorant because it's built upon a lack of knowledge. And I think the line between disingenuousness and dishonesty is perforated sometimes. So what do you think an alleged investigation into yet another unhinged Daily Telegraph columnist for a non-hate crime and walking your dog in Wales have in common? What do you think these two stories have in common, apart from the fact that they are or they have been seized upon with alacrity by the usual members of the media? And by the usual members of the media, let's not beat about the bush. I mean the people who told you that austerity would be lovely and that it was necessary because you can't blame the bankers, that Boris Johnson would be an absolutely brilliant Prime Minister and was worthy of comparisons with Winston Churchill, that Brexit would make you richer and make Britain stronger and make the NHS waiting lists get shorter and make everything go swimmingly, that Liz Truss was going to be a magnificent Prime Minister and that her fiscal event, her budget, was the finest thing since sliced bread, or since 1968, I think, in the words of Nigel Farage, or that Theresa May was the new Iron Lady, or of course that, as we saw on Question Time last night, that most of the media in this country is left-wing. So you've seen, if you read the Daily Telegraph, and frankly I suppose someone has to, claims that one of their columnists has been investigated by the police for a tweet that was deleted that didn't actually constitute a crime. I don't know how much you've heard of this story, and I'm never quite sure whether I'm right in drawing attention to things that are largely confected and invented, but I think it reaches a point, and it is my dad's old paper, it reaches a point where you have to talk about it because the truth is not even getting its trousers on, and the lie has been around the world twice. So the phrase they've been using is a non-crime hate incident to describe, I'm going to say this because oddly, the wrong people are using the word Kafkaesque. So a columnist on the Daily Telegraph called Alison Pearson made a tweet. She blocked me ages ago, so I haven't followed her tweets recently, but they have often flirted with absolute madness. She made a tweet and then she deleted it. So you have to ask yourself two questions. What did she tweet and why did she delete it? Well, you might think you have to ask yourself two questions. What did she tweet and why did she delete it? But if you're the editor of the Daily Telegraph, apparently you don't care what she tweeted and you don't care why she deleted it. You only care that she's told you she's been investigated by the police for a non-crime hate incident. So there's three questions now. Question number one, what did she tweet? Question number two, why did she delete it? And question number three, is she being investigated for a non-crime hate incident? I can answer one of those questions. And the answer is no. Essex police have issued a statement, which every single person trying to turn this story into a massive brouhaha will be aware of, even if they're pretending to you that they're not. Essex police have issued a statement in which they make it clear they are investigating an alleged offence of inciting racial hatred. I'll say that again because you've had 7 stories in the Daily Telegraph. You had 2 front pages claiming that there's an investigation into a non-crime hate incident. Officers attended an address in Essex and invited a woman to come to a voluntary interview. They said it related to an investigation into an alleged offence of inciting racial hatred, so a crime. So that's question number 3 answered. Question number 1, what did she tweet? I don't know. So how can you possibly get angry about somebody being investigated for inciting racial hatred if you don't know what they said? That's not a question for you or for me. It's a question for the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, all the usual jokers and grifters lining up to pretend that this is some sort of national scandal. How cross would you be about something you didn't know the contents of? Well, it's ridiculous. They're investigating for a non-crime hate incident. No, they're not. They're investigating an alleged offence of inciting racial hatred. So then you're left with the second question. You can't answer the first one. You can't really speculate except to know that the police consider it to be grounds for at least an investigation into a potential incitement of racial hatred. You can answer the third question. Is there an investigation into a non-crime hate incident? Answer no. It's an actual... How many people are listening to this going, oh my God, I had no idea. I've been listening to my radio thinking that this was the biggest crime of the century. I've been reading the Daily Telegraph, opening my newspapers, thinking that this was up there with the Guildford Four. There is actually an investigation into an alleged offence of inciting racial hatred. I've been categorically told by several people that I trust, because I forgot what they told me about Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Brexit, austerity, David Cameron, Dominic Cummings, Theresa May, that this was an investigation into a non-crime hate incident. So you're left only with the second question, which is why would you delete it? And this is a contributor to public discourse with a long history of outrageous comments. That's what you get paid for if you're a columnist on the Daily Telegraph. So the idea that they tweeted something that then occurred to them might be a little bit beyond the pale. Leaves, in my opinion, if we were to deploy Occam's razor, it leaves only one possible explanation for why she might have deleted the tweet in the first place, which is, wait for it, she was worried that she might get into trouble. You might be able to think of another reason. You might be able to think of another explanation. So question number 1, what did she tweet? We don't know. Question number 2, why did she delete it? Well, probably because she was worried it would get her into trouble. Question number 3, is she being investigated for a non-hate crime incident? Answer no. So what did she tweet? Something that Essex police consider to be worthy of an investigation into incitement of racial hatred. And yet, if you were to listen to some commentators and read some columnists, you would know none of that. Absolutely extraordinary. And I can tell you for a fact that nobody knows what she tweeted, up to and including colleagues at the Daily Telegraph. There is a lot of speculation going on, and there is a lot of rumour in the building itself about both what the content of the tweet might have been and about where the decision to delete it might have been made. or why the decision to delete it might have been made. But what has been incredibly absent from this coverage is the truth, which is why the misinformation segment of this programme is probably a bit too serious for me to keep making jokes about the absence of a stingle. A stingle? A sting. I call it a stingle. That's a great word. So it's like, I can't say it's too serious for jokes about a sting and then invent the word stingle, can I? That's completely undermining my own attempt at gravitas. I'll read you all of this. It's a statement from Essex Police, because I care about things like this, even if you don't. And I know that you do. It's just the effort put into misinforming you and exciting you to positions of ignorant anger that gets a little bit frustrating sometimes. Officers attended an address in Essex, and just every single journalist in the country has full access to this. Every broadcaster, every columnist, every pundit, every writer, every radio presenter, every TV host, all right? We all do. It's not hard. It's public. Public. Officers attended an address in Essex and invited a woman to come to a voluntary interview. They said it related to an investigation into an alleged offence of inciting racial hatred, a link to a post on social media. We police without fear or favour, and that's why we respond to alleged offences which are reported to us by members of the public. For clarity, a complaint of a possible criminal offence was made to the police, and this is why we called, to arrange an interview. Everyone was polite and professional throughout the brief conversation. As this was a call to set up an interview, no extra details were given. That's because we have to follow the law and make sure that everyone's rights and entitlements, in particular to seek legal advice, were respected. It's the correct procedure as set out by the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, 1984. This is the right way to do things. But this weird new breed of Trumpian Toryism is determined to keep attacking the police. And it is frankly extraordinary, and it's dangerous, and it's dishonest, and you deserve better. So that is misinformation number one. What could the other story possibly be? Well, why did I say to you, what does this absolute abomination masquerading as journalism in the Daily Telegraph have to do with taking your dog for a walk in Wales? Well, I'll tell you. Here's a headline in the Daily Mail. Sorry, you can't walk your dog here. It's racist. Oh, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, any black people out there who like dogs, why don't you give me a ring? This is absolutely disgusting. This is ridiculous. Apparently, in Wales, they've got some groups that have decided that you can't take your dog for a walk because it might upset a black person. OK, that's the headline. Richard Littlejohn gets a whole column out of it. The Daily Mail runs spiel upon spiel, quoting all sorts of weirdos. The Welsh Government's report concluded various things, but there is a quote, once again, which cuts to the absolute heart of the allegations and the accusations that have been made. And the report states, without fear or favour, that there is absolutely no plan whatsoever for any attempts to create dog-free areas or to prevent people from walking their dogs in Wales. I mean, it is quite extraordinary. The Times, to their credit, they put a headline out which says dog-free zones in countryside, quotes, can reduce racism. They use the quotes because the report may well have suggested that. The Daily Mail doesn't bother with quotes. It just goes straight in for, sorry, you can't walk your dog here. It's racist. Welsh Labour considers countryside ban, knowing full well precisely the type of characters that will start jumping up and down, namely, of course, Richard Littlejohn. But again, every government in the country, every politician, every journalist, every commentator in the country could quite easily have accessed the evidence that the Times reports upon today, the Times newspaper reports upon today, and the Times newspaper concludes or clarifies, reports the Welsh Government as saying that there is absolutely no plan whatsoever to introduce the sort of measures that the headline writers at the Daily Mail are pretending has been suggested. I mean, the mind boggles, doesn't it, really? That the gulf between the truth and the reality could be so huge. So it may have been suggested, but it absolutely isn't going to be done. But don't let that stop you getting furious, all right? Or writing a fulminating newspaper column about the imminent banning of dogs from the hills of Wales. I also for the record, I think it's important to have some areas of public space where dogs aren't allowed, and some areas where dogs can be taken off the leash and allowed to run free. In essence, this report highlights the need for concerted action by all people working in the environment sector, in its broadest terms, to heed the voices of ethnic minorities in Wales, championing inclusive approaches that foster environmental justice and equitable access to green spaces for all. The idea that there is going to be a ban on people walking their dogs is absolute, my words now, nonsense. Whew, what do you want to do next? Those are your two examples of missed information today. So one very, very serious story, one relatively silly one, until you remember what these stories are designed to do, or at least what these stories are designed to do when they find themselves in certain hands. It's to make you think that we put far too much effort into looking after ethnic minorities. Or why are we listening to them? That's ridiculous. Just, you're not really allowed to be racist in this country anymore. That's why some people perhaps delete their tweets. I don't know. We can only speculate. But you can certainly do it subtly, can't you? Flipping ethnic minorities, trying to take away our dogs. How far is the journey from this story, this lie, to the claim by Donald Trump that they're eating your dogs and they are eating your cats? And while we're on the subject of Donald Trump, a quick true or false for you. Has he or has he not just appointed to a senior position in his incoming administration a politician who has boasted about shooting her pet dog because they didn't get on? So the man who campaigned on a pro-pet platform has just appointed a pet killer. True or false?
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. I have to check. You tell me stuff. I presume it's true. Guess which politician has jumped on the racist dog story? I jumped on it hardest. No guesses, no prizes for guessing which members of the media do so. 30p Lee Anderson. Is your dog racist? Don't bother going to Wales if it is. Labour-run Wales has quite clearly had enough of racist dogs who failed to see the benefits of multiculturalism. Even Lee could read the statement issued by the Welsh Government yesterday explaining that there is absolutely no plan whatsoever to ban dogs from the countryside, with a spokesman dismissing the entire suggestion yesterday, before all these stories appeared in the media today, as, quotes, a complete misrepresentation of the report. I am doing the Lord's work, but I am doing it for you. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. This is a Friday subject, but do you know, just as I sort of prepared my opening comments in my head a moment ago, I suddenly realised it's not actually as funny as the rest of us think it is. You know what emetophobia is, don't you? Do you know what emetophobia is? Emetophobia is a fear of vomiting, which most of us would find a little bit hard to get our heads around. But it is as nothing compared to another phobia that is in the news today, which doesn't actually, as far as I'm aware, have its own name. This is going to... I mean, listen, do you want to know what the topic is? All right? Phobias that are awful, but everyone else finds them funny. If you've got a phobia that is genuinely limiting your life, a genuinely life-limiting phobia, but it's not an obvious one, and therefore other people either find it hard to believe or they find it funny. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need if you want to get in early. Because I did this once years and years and years ago, and I couldn't believe the difficulties that people had. I did it because I met a bloke, and I still don't know, actually, whether he's shared it on air or not, because he's quite a well-known broadcaster. You're going to think this is April the 1st, aren't you? Just check your calendar first, all right? I'll give you a moment. Don't check it in the Daily Mail. They're probably claiming it's June. Check your calendar. It's definitely not April the 1st, all right? It is the 15th of November, fact fans, 2024. I know a bloke who's terrified of vegetables, right? And I'm about to share a story with you that will make this seem less unlikely. He's genuinely terrified, not just eating them. He doesn't like being in the same... I mean, it is obviously very... I mean, this was about 15 years ago, and I think he was seeking some sort of help, but he would struggle even in supermarkets. You'd sort of... You remember how Boris Johnson claimed he'd been ambushed by a cake? You can get ambushed by a cauliflower. Usually you're okay, because the aisles are quite distinct in big supermarkets, but in the smaller supermarkets, in the Tesco Expresses, it's not unknown, of course, for the ambient packaging on the right side aisle and the fresh vegetables or the fresh produce in the crates on the left side of the aisle. He wouldn't be able to go up that aisle. So if the thing he wanted to buy was opposite a tub of carrots, he wouldn't be able to go up the aisle and get the thing he wanted to buy. He'd either have to not buy it at all or go shopping with someone else or ask someone to get it for him. Emetophobia is a fear of vomiting. It's not just a fear of your own vomiting. In fact, quite the opposite. It's a fear of other people vomiting, a fear so profound that it actually stops you doing things. It stops you going out, for example, on New Year's Eve. The fear of other people's vomit is so utterly acute that it stops you doing things you would otherwise want to do. My acquaintance who is phobic about vegetables, and this is why I want to stress, I want to have a proper conversation about this, but we can't pretend that elements of it won't be funny to the people who aren't suffering. It may even be funny to you. So a Swedish government minister, I can't believe I'm reading this. I swear to you, I thought it was April the 1st when I read this. But leaked emails have revealed that a Swedish government minister has rooms swept by her security staff before she goes into them. What do you think the rooms are being swept for? Well, that would be the obvious answer, but no, it's not bugs, as in like little tiny microphones, and it's not bugs as in spiders, which is what you might call a credible, a rational, a predictable's a nice word, a predictable phobia. A predictable phobia. It's not that. What do you think it is? I mean, what it is, not cauliflowers. So a Swedish government minister, the Minister of Equality, which is a bit ironic, given her attitude towards this particular thing. A Swedish government minister, the Minister of Equality, has an aversion to something that is so powerful, her aides must go into all rooms that she is due to enter and scramble to remove the fruit before she arrives. 8 minutes after 12. What do you think it is? It's not Liz Truss and lettuces. I mean, she may have developed a phobia latterly, but she certainly didn't have one in her pomp. The answer, and I'm not doing a hook and tease on this one because I want you to ring me with the phobias that you have that are real. The answer is bananas. Now you see what I mean, because that's hilarious, right? But imagine if you did actually have a phobia of bananas. So think about a thing you think you've got a phobia of. That sounded like a tongue twister, didn't it? Think about a thing you think you've got a phobia of. It's quite a good way of getting your thuzz and your fuzz in the right place. Think about the things you think you've got a phobia. I'll stop now, sorry. I used to think I had a phobia about rats, and that makes sense on every level, right? Rats carry diseases, they bite you, they're quite dirty, they wee everywhere. Rats are not a good thing to have in your house. And my phobia of rats was such that if I was wandering down a road in autumn and there was a sort of swirl of leaves in a doorway, I would jump. Not literally off my feet, but I would, like jump. I'd go, oh, thinking it was just out of the corner of my eye. I think phobias of snakes are similar. You've got that thing that can creep up on you and do you harm. I don't know whether evolutionarily we altered slightly when the bubonic plague kicked off. It wasn't on the rats, was it, in the end? It was on the fleas that were on the rats, but the point stands. And I had this thing. Spiders are poisonous in many cultures. I said many cultures. I sound like Kemi Badenoch. Spiders are poisonous. Many spiders are poisonous, regardless of what culture you're in. It's many countries have a preponderance of poisonous spiders. Another tongue twister. A preponderance of poisonous spiders. So you would be scared of that. There's a reason to be scared of a spider, right? Because evolutionarily, our genetic memory is that they're poisonous. It's not because they're scary. It's because they're poisonous. They're also a bit really like. So even now my girls love it when I just grab a spider with my hand and throw it out the window. It's about the only time they think I'm brave. So spiders make sense. Rats make sense. I don't think I was actually ratophobic. I think I had a sort of rational fear of rats, or at least I got cured of it when we had rats. We bought a house, and shortly after moving in, realised that a few rats had moved in, and I moved the family out. We moved to a hotel until the rats had been dealt with, and just sort of that would be aversion therapy, wouldn't it? That would be aversion therapy, and it cured me a bit. So now if I'm walking down the canal path and a rat flies across the towpath, I don't jump into my wife's arms and start crying like an infant. I'm like, I don't like it, or the dog sort of disturbs one from the undergrowth. I don't like it. Venomous, not poisonous. Thank you, David. Spiders are venomous, not poisonous, Keith. Be careful. Keep up. So that makes sense. Flying makes sense. A fear of flying makes sense because, think about it. I don't want to give anybody a phobia, but what? You're going to do what? You can get in a tin can and go thousands of feet in the air. Sheesh. There's a terrible story regarding the absolutely wonderful journalist and poker player and presenter Victoria Corrin. I think I've shared it with you before, about her fear of flying, which is, again, something else that you'd struggle to believe if the evidence wasn't in front of you. So spiders, rats, flying, all of these things make sense. Other people being sick, I guess, emetophobia, you might chalk it up to a similar thing. It's like, you could get ill, couldn't you, from exposure to somebody else's vomit, but it's not the same as a venomous spider or a rat, a disease-carrying rat. But bananas. How many people there, when I said bananas, in their head heard the words in pyjamas coming down the stairs? I refuse to believe it was just me. I say bananas, you say in pyjamas. And we both say coming down the stairs. Bananas in pyjamas. She's spoken about it. She told the paper that the phobia was something I'm getting professional help for. Ulf Kristersson, the Prime Minister, said that Brandberg's aversion had not affected her government work. Well, it would do if she was sent to a banana republic to negotiate a new trade treaty, wouldn't it? Ba-boom tish. I am disturbed when a hard-working cabinet minister is almost reduced to a phobia and people make fun of it, he said. I think you should be too good for that. And that's why I said to you, this is both simultaneously serious and silly. Because he's right and wrong at the same time, isn't he? You should not be reduced to a phobia. But the idea of being terrified of bananas is objectively funny. Well, I think it's objectively funny, but I categorically don't want to offend anybody who is terrified of bananas. But I do want to create a space that is comfortable enough for you to ring in and tell us about the thing that you have a phobia of that other people have a tendency to find funny, okay? I can't call it the funniest phobias because then the Prime Minister of Sweden is going to be really upset with me. There's a sentence I've never said before. And none of us want the Prime Minister of Sweden to be upset with us, do we? But he's right. He says you shouldn't reduce, or you shouldn't make fun of it. But if it's a banana, you can't really help it. And what other phobias fit into that category? And true answers only, honest answers only. All right, numbers are open. Numbers are open. Phone lines are open. Number you need is 03456060 973. The thing I told you about Donald Trump's recent appointment was true. One of the recent appointments to his administration, senior appointments to his administration, is indeed a woman who had previously boasted about shooting her pet dog because they didn't get on. The Robert Kennedy list is extraordinary. The man who's been put in charge of health in America. I'm going to run you through a list of like 8 mad things, one of which is true. And you can see if you can work out which one of these mad things Robert F. Kennedy, the new Secretary of State for Health, has actually done or said. Okay, you ready? He's questioned whether HIV causes AIDS. The man that Donald Trump has put in charge of the nation's health has A, questioned whether HIV causes AIDS, B, claimed that Wi-Fi causes cancer, C, suggested that antidepressants cause school shootings, D, claimed that tap water can turn kids gay or transgender, E, repeatedly said that vaccines aren't effective and cause autism, and that's all vaccines, including things like polio. He's touted ivermectin as a COVID cure. He's promoted discredited fluoride conspiracy theories and wants it removed from water. He encourages the drinking of raw milk, despite the serious health risks involved. And I've given it away now, haven't I? He once cut off the head of a dead whale and took it home. Yeah, you did hear me correctly. He once cut off the head of a dead whale and took it home. And finally, did the man who Donald Trump has put in charge of America's health once take a dead bear to Central Park and leave it there with a bicycle on top of it? Which one of those is true?
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 12 is the time. Not a lot of jeopardy there, you're right. It was a trick question. They were all true. That's probably the death of my true or false game, when I read you a long list of things that are all true and pretend that only one of them is. Or I read you, you've heard me do this. I used to do it with Boris Johnson. I read 3 or 4 things. One of these things is true. And then I come back after the break and I go, ha-ha, gotcha. They all are. But I don't think that you're ever going to get one quite as terrifying as that. The idea that the man that Donald Trump has put in charge of health in America has a form for all of those things that I just said. I'm going to run you through them all again because hey, I just, for all the people still drinking liberal tears after Donald Trump's victory, as with Brexit, you've put me in that terrible position again where it falls to me to show you what you have actually won. I'm like the anti-Jim Bowen in this space, and I appreciate that's a reference that not everybody's going to get. But there used to be a rather splendid game show on television called Bullseye, and it became part of folklore, really, because for 2 reasons. Quite often, people would, I don't think this happened very often, but in our memories, people would regularly win speedboats and then turn out to live on the 17th floor of a tower block in the most landlocked part of the country. But the other thing they do is show you what you could have won. So the big prize at the end was a surprise. It's like the panel would turn around and there'd be a little car there or a speedboat or something, that big, that cool. But in an act of peculiar televisual sadism, they'd show the people who just lost what they could have won. And Jim Bowen would go, here's what you could have won. He was a fantastic old kind of style entertainer. Here's what you could have won. I've got the opposite job. My job with Brexit and indeed with Donald Trump is to take all the people who did win, all the people drinking liberal tears, yay, MAGA, go Trump, and I have to show them what they did win. I have to show you what you have won. So here's what you have actually won. A Secretary of State for Health or a head of the health system in America who has questioned whether HIV causes AIDS, claimed Wi-Fi causes cancer, suggested antidepressants cause school shootings, claimed that tap water can turn your kids gay or transgender, has repeatedly said that vaccines don't work, touted ivermectin as a cure for COVID, wants fluoride removed from tap water, wants everyone to drink raw milk, once cut off the head of a dead whale and took it home, and once took a dead bear to Central Park and left it there with a bicycle on top. And here's the thing. I wouldn't put any money on him being the maddest member of the administration by the time Donald Trump has finished putting it together. I'm told by quite a few of you that Bullseye is coming back with Freddie Flintoff presenting it, which is about as close to a perfect piece of casting as it's possible to imagine. But I digress. Phobias. And the curious tension between a serious condition and its comical consequences. Joe's in Gravesend. Joe, what made you pick up the phone?
I have emetophobia that you spoke of earlier.
And it's not remotely funny, is it?
To me, it's not, no. It sort of delayed me trying for a family until I was in my 30s.
God.
So I was so worried about morning sickness. It stops me flying easily because I worry about turbulence and people being sick around me. I would never get the last train home in case people being sick on it. If people are ill from work, then I just won't go to the office, or if their children have been ill.
Do people sympathise? Do people believe you? Do they think you're a bit soft?
I think to a degree, yes. But it's quite hard unless you suffer from it.
Of course it is.
It's difficult to understand.
And how have you had a child, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes.
That was incredible timing. But you couldn't have scripted that, could you, Joe?
Yeah.
Oh, darling. Yeah. Do you want? You don't have to stay on if you don't want to.
Yeah. No.
No, you go and deal with her. Is it?
Yes, I do. And no, I didn't have any morning sickness.
Oh.
My first job was to see my GP for anti-sickness pills, which they sorted out.
And it's still there. You've still. I mean, what about when the little one is feeding and stuff like that? Is that a difficulty for you?
That doesn't really affect me. It's strange with her when she was sort of spitting up a little bit. That didn't really bother me too much. But all other ways, very difficult. Even when I went in to have her, the main focus I had was just making sure that I had all the anti-sickness medication in advance.
That's better. That's better.
Yeah. Anyway, I think she's just saying hello.
I'm saying hello back with knobs on. Hello.
Yeah.
That's hello. That's crazy. And have you had therapy? Have you tried to get? Do we know where it comes from? Did it start in childhood?
I've had it for as long as I can remember.
Wow.
I don't know.
Do. Are those liberal tears that we're hearing in the background, Joe?
Well, I'm not too sure.
Time will tell.
I think she's got a cold, so
bless her.
yeah, a little bit miserable, but yeah.
I love it. Thank you, and that's perfect because that is. I mean, I don't think anyone finds that funny now. The idea of postponing motherhood or parenthood, but motherhood in particular, because dads generally don't get morning sickness. Postponing motherhood because of your emetophobia. But I now can, because we've gone to the serious end, I can now look for the strangest phobia, the least sympathetic phobia, the thing that you are truly terrified of, that people either don't believe or can't help taking the mickey out of, all right? 0345 6060 973. I just want to have a private conversation quickly if I can. Keith, was that the most extraordinary example of timing that we've ever encountered together on the radio? I thought, it was just mad, wasn't it? People will think you pressed a button at that point, won't they? They'll think it was Nick Abbott haunting the studio with his box of audio tricks or something, but it wasn't. It was all real. Verity is in Brighton. Phobias, Verity, what have you got?
Okay, you're going to have a field day with this one because I've never told this to anyone and not been laughed at. And also I'm going to coin a term live on the radio. Yes. Morris chorophobia.
A fear of...
Chorophobia is a fear of dancing. And I've added Morris to that because it's a particular phobia of Morris dancing and Morris dancers.
How do we establish how serious this is, how serious you are being? I mean, if chorophobia exists, then the fear of dancing exists, but your phobia is very specific to Morris men and Morris women.
Well, think about people who are fear of clowns. That's quite common.
Yes.
I think it's quite similar to that. I will hear the sound of jingling bells. You know, even at Christmas, when there's jingling bells on things on the radio, and I will picture Morris dancers in my head.
Gosh.
And since I can remember, they just seem completely sinister to me. A belief in that it's kind of a mixture of a shuddering down my spine, a kind of disgusted feeling, and a feeling of kind of abject evil.
And when did you first notice it? Do you think you had I'm not making light of it. Well, I am a bit.
No, I mean, it's fine. It's really silly.
I have to choose my words carefully because I don't want to suggest anything unseemly or illegal. But did you have an unpleasant encounter with a Morris dancer in your...
No, nothing personally. But I do remember there's an episode of Doctor Who called The Demons, a brilliant one with John Pertwee,
yes.
Which I can't... I have to fast forward bits in the DVD, but I saw it as a child, and there are Morris dancers in that who turn out to be kind of in league with devils. But before I knew that, I watched this when I was about 5 or 6 or something. Before I knew that, I was already scared of them.
Well, I never. And there's a bit of a jingle on this line. I hope it's not disturbing you. I don't know. It could be my bangles. Are you wearing lots of bangles?
No, none at all. No.
I don't know what it is.
I just looked this up on Google though to see if anyone else had this. And I saw some Morris dancers, and it
set you off.
It's the closest I come to having a real prejudice, actually. I think...
Do you know two interesting things? So Chris got in touch saying, did this guy watch Doctor Who and the Demons just before you started talking about Doctor Who and the Demons? And Harry wrote, Morris dancers fill me with a cold dread. I thought I was the only one.
Oh, there we go. Maybe
I have to fast forward the Morris dancing too, says Callum, but not out of fear. Morris is quite technical. I like that. That's amazing, isn't it? Well, stay safe. Stay away from Morris dancing. Is it a big thing in Brighton, Morris dancing?
That's the trouble. I mean, I can't go to Lewis. I've got friends in Hastings. I can't go there. I got offered a gig there recently. I just won't go.
Because they're everywhere.
They pop up in Brighton sometimes, though. We were at a lovely pub a couple of years ago, and I hadn't looked at the date. I guess it was a Morris Day or something, and suddenly they were just all in there with their tankards. And
they're filthy tankards.
And then they started dancing,
hitting their sticks, ringing their bells with their tricorn hats. In fact, well, you stay safe. Stay away from Morris dancers. Wonder where the best place to live in the country is if you've got a Morris chorophobia. Chorophobia itself would be interesting. That must make socialising difficult. Sakina is in Uxbridge. Sakina, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I have a daughter who is 7 years old, and she has fear of speaking.
Oh, no.
And this is it's a condition called selective mutism. Unfortunately, there's very little known about it.
And it's considered to be a phobia, is it? Because I'm familiar with selective mutism. I didn't know it got filed under phobia, medically speaking.
It is considered as a phobia.
Her.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very difficult because most people don't know about it, but in every 1,000, there's seven people who have selective mutism. And, I mean, when she goes to school, people ask her, why don't you speak? And that is exactly what you're not supposed to do.
Oh.
There's very little help. I mean, when I started noticing and brought it to the GP's attention, they constantly say to me, she's just shy. She will eventually speak.
Okay.
And the issue is the earlier you catch it and, there's some therapy that you can be involved in, then the chances of her overcoming it are higher. Once you hit 7, it becomes difficult. I've taken it upon myself, to do the research and learn about it.
How are you getting on? I mean, has she ever spoken? I mean, can you know that she can speak or not?
She fully speaks. So at home, she's completely normal. She speaks absolutely normally. But any new place, any strangers, any new family members, she literally just, she freezes. She actually has fear of hearing her voice.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and really there's very little known. There is no help. She's had official diagnosis, but they don't have enough people, even within speech and language therapists, who understand this quite well. And I've come across cases of people who've gone into adulthood and not been able to overcome.
And when you ask her what she's frightened of, what does she say?
She says the words get stuck in my throat.
So she's frightened that nothing will come out. So she tries.
Yeah.
To avoid speaking. It sounds like a dream state, doesn't it? It sounds like a sort of anxiety dream. The poor thing. When you want to scream in a dream because someone's chasing you and nothing comes out of your mouth.
Exactly that. And, so there's a lot of things that we can implement. Is like you're supposed to really relax her, make jokes, make her forget about speaking, and then she just naturally speaks. But because it's not understood, I mean, it's at the moment I'm really having to fight. She can't go to basic things like, after school clubs. She can't go swimming because, she won't answer instructors.
No, of course.
I wanted to mention it particularly because I really think we need to raise awareness. There is a lot more people suffering from it. It's silent, suffering.
And it's a crucial distinction between what your daughter has, because she talks fluently and freely at home, and what people, because my friend Jason Arday, I don't know if you know about Jason, he's one of the cleverest people in the world, I think. He became Cambridge's youngest black professor last year. He didn't speak until he was 11, but he didn't speak at all until he was 11. He didn't read until he was 18, and he's got an autism diagnosis. But that's not going to be part of your daughter's story because she's talking freely at home.
Yes, it is not. And the problem is, even when I'm going through all these sessions, they are trying to equate it with autism, and it is not autism. I mean, I've done enough of research myself. So at the moment, I'm going into school because there aren't people who are aware of it, and I'm trying to help teachers understand. So she started talking to some of her colleagues in class, and because we've implemented some of the measures. Yeah, it's
I feel for
something I've
you.
never
I really
heard
do.
about.
And she's lucky to have you in her corner. The advocacy that a mum like you provides in these circumstances is absolutely invaluable and immeasurable. But I have some idea of how exhausting and dispiriting it must be for you, especially when you've got the door. The door is the point at which the problem appears, and then when she comes home, disappears. I so much love to both of you, Sakina, seriously. And I mean, there it is. I talk about veering from the sublime, not the sublime, the serious to the ridiculous, from a fear of Morris dancing to a fear of your own voice almost. I told you this would cover both bases, but I wasn't expecting it to be proved quite so conclusively. And there's still time. Amelia Cox is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
35 is the time. I'm just going to draw a little distinction between long-term listeners and short-term colleagues. Do you know Eleanor, the producer of this programme, is unaware of my rap record? If you're listening to this programme a few years ago, you'll be aware I cut an absolutely banging drum and bass tune, CHOON. It is, you're right, it is more garage, actually. It is more garage. Genres, eh? And she knew absolutely nothing about it. Whereas there was a period on this programme when Keith was a mere listener before he actually became part of the crew, where I would probably refer to it at least once a week, possibly once a day, and even occasionally once an hour. But there's a reason in the news why I might play it next week. I don't think I'll play it today. We've got too many people with contributions to make to this conversation, although there's still room for you to get involved. 0345 606 0973. I would like to find someone who is terrified of bananas, because the whole conversation is prompted by a politician in Sweden who has a morbid fear of bananas. It's a good job it's not Swedes. No? It's a good job it's not sweet. All right. 12:36 is the time. But there's a story in the news which might give me an excuse to play a rap recorded by a tragic middle-aged man. Albeit I was not quite as middle-aged when I did it as I did then. See if you can work out what that story is. James, I suffer from chromatophobia. This is a perfect example from Kate in Bradford of something that straddles the seriousness and the silliness quite perfectly. It's a fear of spending money. And yes, I live in Yorkshire with all of the associated reluctance to spend money jibes. So it sounds like a joke, but it has a real impact on my life. From not opening financial mail, to checking bank balances, to turning down invitations from friends because an outing will cost me money, even though she wants to go. She writes, Christmas is awful. All that wasted food and unnecessary buying of stuff. And hopefully some words of encouragement for Sakina. I had selective mutism right up until the age of 30. Some encouragement. All I got at school was that I'm too quiet in class. I'd even be put on report cards. But I didn't get any help at home, which was common in those days. Kids were meant to be seen and not heard. It's sad to hear things aren't much better now. Well, they are for Sakina's little girl, because Sakina's little girl has Sakina moving heaven and earth to help her. 12:38 is the time. Ollie's in Exeter. Ollie, what have you got?
Hi.
Hello.
My heart's absolutely pounding because I'm thinking about it.
Well,
so
you have a
much.
phobia of radio presenters.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Look, it's buttons, and I know it's not uncommon, but it's horrible.
Well, you say it's not uncommon. This will be news to a lot of people. It's not news to me, because this was one of the things that emerged last time we talked about this. But it's real, and it's life limiting.
It's horrible, and I don't even like saying the word or hearing the word. It's that stupid, yeah. And I've had it all my life, and I've tried therapy, and nothing helps.
Can you remember not having it?
No, I can't remember not having it. So it's something, either I brought it with me, which I don't think, I've tried even regressions, past life stuff.
Yeah.
Or something weird happened when I was very tiny.
Involving those things that will not be named. So how does it,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you accommodate that in your daily life?
I just have to blank it out. I was saying to your lovely person on the phone, I have no clothes with buttons, and when I go shopping...
You don't have to say the word. You don't have to say the word if you don't want to.
Okay.
It's up to you.
And my partner, it's being around my partner when he's wearing particularly difficult items of clothing that I get very anxious, and my heart's beating like crazy now just talking about it.
Oh,
and when I had my daughter, I was 40. That wasn't the reason, I didn't not have children because of them.
Sure.
And I had to override it with her because people would give her, and her little friends and everything. So
but it didn't help.
horrible.
The exposure didn't help. You didn't sort of get through the other side and then be a bit more relaxed about it.
You were talking about that eye therapy thing. That
brain spotting.
I've had that.
You even did
was
that. But you'd need to know where it started.
I couldn't carry on with it. It was just too traumatic.
Oh, my love. That's terrible. I think for that to, and I'm not a therapist, obviously, but I think for that to be really effective, you'd need to have some idea of where it started. And we haven't got we haven't got a clue, have we? We haven't got a clue.
No.
So is it all Velcro and zips? That sounded quite inappropriate, didn't it? But
it absolutely is. I love zips.
Gosh, well, you would. What about press studs?
Yeah, they're fine.
Yeah.
Anything metal. I could wear jeans with those metal
things on them.
Yeah,
rivets.
it's the type. The old-fashioned. It's an old-fashioned thing.
Just extraordinary, isn't it? Well, I wish you well. I mean,
thank you. Let somebody else talk to you now, James.
Okay, thank you, Ollie. I'll tell you what. I'll talk to Niall, who's in County Donegal. Niall, what's going on?
Hi, James. Mine's is significantly less important as the button one.
Yes.
I used to have a very serious phobia of bulldog clips. I know. It's just the stupidest thing to me.
How did it?
Well, I wasn't necessarily afraid of. What happened was if I touched them or if I looked at them, I would get quite sick.
Really?
Sometimes I could even vomit from kind of prolonged exposure
to a bulldog clip. Well, you must have hurt yourself when you were very little, don't you think?
Well, see, I went to therapy for a variety of things, not just the bulldog clips, but the bulldog clips definitely came up. And basically, we weren't even able to figure out why I was so afraid of them. The only thing that the therapist could come up with was, at some point in my life, something awful and fundamental happened to me, and I was holding or touching or looking at a bulldog clip.
So there's either an association or the pain when you've got that's happened again. Where you got a bulldog clip somewhere sensitive and the pain never left you, even if the bulldog clip did.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
Are you better now?
I'm better. Obviously, thankfully, I'm in a job in the health service, which bulldog clips are 90% of what I do.
90%? So, shut up. What job could you have where bulldog clips are 90% of what you do? Even if you made bulldog clips for a living, they wouldn't be 90% of what you do.
That's maybe a slight over-exaggeration. I work in subject access, and we have to bulldog clip absolutely everything.
I love that.
But it used to be people used to put bulldog clips on my desk.
That's on the list. No, just because they would laugh. Well, you didn't find it funny then, though, I don't imagine.
I appreciated how stupid it was.
Yes.
But, I also didn't appreciate how it would make me feel.
That's fantastic. 12:43 is the time. This is for Verity in Brighton. Abingdon traditional Morris dance. This is knitting together several stories that have been on the programme this week. And my thanks to a very stable milking stool on Blue Sky for bringing this to my attention. Abingdon traditional Morris dancers have announced that they are leaving Twitter and setting up instead on Blue Sky, which is where I am now conducting most of my social media activity. So there it is, two stories colliding: the phobia phone-in and the week-long promotion of Blue Sky as a preferable social media platform to Twitter. But the person who tweeted it originally, who didn't send it to me, someone called John Bounds, he wrote, "Musk's lost the Morris dancers. It's over," which I thought was a beautifully turned phrase. 12:44 is the time. Ndika is in Derby. Ndika, what made you pick up the phone?
James, first-time caller, long-time listener.
Welcome.
Levis.
It's only me. It's only me.
Thank you. So my phobia is of stickers.
Stickers? Sticky things? Stickers, like have a sticker. You've been good at the dentist, have a sticker.
Exactly.
Really?
That kind of sticker. So sticky things is fine, sellotape.
Yeah.
Christmas around the corner is normal. But specifically stickers just makes my skin absolutely crawl.
What, like a profound discomfort, like a real, I need to get out of this space, or I need to get this sticker out of my space.
Yeah. Like...
When did it first appear? Can you remember not having it?
No, I think I've always had it. So, when you go to school, and then you get, like, a sticker, and then, I don't know.
And you didn't want it? Like a gold star even would set you off?
Yeah, they'd put it on your jumper, and then I'd rip it off, and then put it in my jot or something.
Straight away?
Yeah.
Oof. I mean, it's not as life-limiting as some of the other ones we've heard of, is it? I mean, it's quite a stickers are relative. I'm presuming they're quite easy to avoid.
Yeah. I mean, I've not seen a sticker too recently, so...
Long may it continue, Endika. Hang in there. More power to your elbow. 12:45 is the time. People find this from Sam, all on Blue Sky, remember, these days, although I'll also take texts and WhatsApps. People find my phobia of Chinook helicopters hilarious. I find them viscerally disturbing to the point of panic. This is helpful from the control practitioners. Phobia facts. We're only born with two inherent fears, loud noises and being dropped. Spiders have teeny tiny lungs, so when they run away in fear and suddenly stop, it's because they've run out of breath. The first fact is helpful. The second fact is fascinating. Helen tells us that her best friend forever has a fear of bananas and polystyrene. So I sent her both in the post. I know it was evil, but she is still my best friend. And Cal Mac writes, try getting around your favourite Greek islands with a wife who is absolutely terrified of cats. There was a little girl. It wasn't my dog, but it was a cute dog. I've got a cute dog, a cute little dog. And there was a little girl a couple of days ago, I can't remember where I was, coming out of the park, and she was absolutely terrified of just this cute little dog on a lead. So there's nothing you can do. You can't, and you just sort of think that's not normal. That's terrible. But if it was a cat and you're in Greece where they're running wild almost everywhere, it would have a severe limit on your freedoms. It's 12:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:49 is the time. I think I'm going to hit 100,000 followers on Blue Sky this weekend. That's extraordinary. I mean, I listen. I find social media fascinating. You know that I do, but it took me years to get up to that kind of level on Twitter. It'll pan out soon. Clifton Suspension Bridge has left as well. Nick the Wolfman tells me, not just the Abingdon Morris dancers. So all the big accounts now closing down their action on Twitter. What would you say? Nick says that's a bridge too far. Perhaps Twitter has become a bridge too far. I'd gone for a burning bridges joke. So that's bridges burning Twitter. There it is. So Clifton Suspension Bridge account has left Twitter, which is the first recorded example in history of bridges burning Twitter. No, it's not as good as the Swede joke, which no one laughed at either. Pan's in Dulwich. Pan, what made you pick up the phone?
James, I've been tormented by cheese since I was about 4 years old.
All cheese?
I'm a Greek native, and so we used to go to my grandparents' house in the mountains of Crete.
Yes.
My grandfather was a shepherd.
Glorious.
And my grandmother would, I don't know what you do because I really try and keep away from the topic of cheese. She used to put the cheese on the vats to ferment or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, one night I was asleep in this room where these cheeses were fermenting.
Yeah.
And I woke up and the stench just did my head in, and my brain was like all over the place. I started to get up, I couldn't see anything. I suddenly threw up. I tried to run out of the room.
Oh, this is awful. Like a delirium, a cheese delirium. You crashed into a cheese.
I crashed into a cheese head first, into the cheese, goat's cheese as well, which just stinks even more than cow's
man.
cheese.
It does smell quite pungent, goat's
and you know
cheese.
Greece
It's quite
well,
goaty.
I understand, you know. But yes, I've had that cheese phobia. I guess it's called tyrophobia.
Is it?
I don't know.
Well, the Greek word for Greek is diri. It's the Greek word for cheese.
Yeah,
so it's dirophobia. And phobia is a Greek word as well. Yeah, dirophobia.
I've never heard of it. Anyway, so basically, and that had consequences throughout my formative years. I was a bit of a sport brat. My mother wouldn't, I said, I can't have any of the food I'm going to eat in this house contaminated by the smell
of cheese,
let alone the sight of cheese. So we had to have 2 fridges.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
And people do that for religious reasons, and I'm tempted to say, cheeses. Needs work. Yeah. I know you're all right now, but...
Well, luckily I married a fabulous woman. She says, I'm not going to put up with this. I love cheese. We're only going to have 1 fridge.
Right.
So, you know...
You can keep it in a box. Really. You keep it, but you don't eat any now.
I've always loved cooked cheese. I love pizzas. I love
so you like Saganaki?
I love Saganaki.
I love Saganaki. I could eat Saganaki till the goats come home. It's delicious, isn't it? But you're not on uncooked cheese. You can't go now.
Cheese I still can't touch. You know, so unfortunately my wife passed away. But
I'm sorry,
so I have to make. Yes, okay, thanks. But I have to make my son, you know, his cheese fixes. But I can't touch the cheese. I have to cut it from the outside. You know, hold the wrapper while I cut the cheese to put it if I'm making the cheese on toast or whatever.
So you have to do it very carefully.
Yeah, very good, yes. But there is one good thing out of this. So I stopped smoking on the day my son was due to be born.
Yes.
And I went to a hypnotist, and she tried to find...
the root of it.
Something that... No, not the root of the smoking, just something that was so horrific in my past.
Oh, yeah.
That she could use it to make me stop smoking.
Oh, wow.
So she found this... She conjured up this memory of mine.
Yeah.
And she used it while I was, under for half an hour. And so if I ever put a cigarette in my mouth again, it reminds me of that time when I fell into that cheese in the mountaintops of Crete at the age of 4.
You're a poet, Pan. You're a poet. You really are. I love.
No, I'm a journalist.
Same thing, mate. And it worked. That's sensational. I mean, I feel for you because I love cheese, but goodness me, it's just quite a big silver lining is that it helped you give up. It helped you give up smoking. Thank you, Pan. I do have these little moments where I think, what if someone had just turned on the radio at that precise moment and heard. And I managed to give up smoking because it reminded me of the time that I fell head first into a vat of cheese in the mountaintops of Crete. A quick heads up on this week's Full Disclosure, which is the culmination of... So I was 17 and I'm 52 now. Is that 35 years? I've been waiting 35 years for this interview. And thank God it lived up to expectations.
My early childhood was very happy. I loved, my grandparents lived on the coast of Norfolk, in North Norfolk. I loved my mum. I loved the women in my family a lot. I remember seeing my first movie, you know, these things that my generation has that no one after really does have in terms of films and television. Just seeing the first moving picture was so alarming and life-changing. Of course, no one really has that now, so it's a different thing in a way.
Yeah, I'd never know, and I've been following you since, as I say, adolescence, when I wanted to be you. How much is part of the myth and how much is real? But Mary Poppins... had a profound effect on you.
It really did have a profound effect on me, and but it was the first moving picture I'd seen. It was the first big cinema I'd gone into. That's another thing that we have that people don't have now. The old provincial flea pit, which was an extraordinary place to come into as a child. You sniffed it like a dog that didn't quite understand all the different smells, because there was sex, there was carbolic, there was children screaming, there was old men waiting to do something. You could go and snog your girlfriend in the back of the stalls, and then this kind of bright crimson silk curtain that just mesmerized me, and it was lit from underneath. It looked like the sun was rising from in front of the curtain, and the film almost looked like it was coming through the curtain. I didn't get the fact that it was projected onto it, and it was just it really was, I think, the most head-turning event of my life.
Were you a normal child at this sort of...
Up to that point, I was quite normal.
Up to Mary Poppins.
I think I drastically changed then, because I immediately decided that I was Julie Andrews' daughter and not my rather dreary military parents' son. And I spent about 2 or 3 years labouring under that particular delusion.
And no one tried to tease you out of it? I mean, were you left to your own devices? A lot of time spent in the grandparents' place in Norfolk, I think, with your brother.
There was, and a lot of time spent wearing my mother's old tweed skirt. It went unremarked in my family, really. They drew the line at one point. I wanted to have a cot for Christmas, but they gave it to me. I wanted a doll. They didn't give me the doll. But what was weird about those kind of people's reaction to that kind of thing, you'd have thought it would be more definitive and more brutal. What they just weren't really that interested,
because they thought you'd grow out of it.
I don't know what they thought. I think they thought it was just wasn't very important.
But when you get to prep school, presumably these things are not tolerated quite as
well. I packed the skirt to go with me to prep school.
Did you really?
And along with all my little grey shorts and jerseys. And I thought, well, I'll be wearing the skirt most mornings, so I better take it with me. And that was when the first inkling came of that things were going to change.
And change they did. That is Rupert Everett. And I'm not kidding. You'll hear the story in the podcast of how I waited 35 years for that interview and struggled to contain my fanboy tendencies. I had his picture on my wall to quote the song at the same school. That was another element of the conversation that is a bit special for me, at least. Last word of the week to Anisha, who's in Birmingham. Anisha, what made you pick up the phone?
I have a fear of bananas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, it's a bit embarrassing.
A genuine, proper shivers down the spine sort of thing. So you sympathise with this Swedish politician who can't go into a room with a banana in it?
Yeah, if that happened to me, I would expect, because I travel a lot for my job, I would expect somebody to remove it or get rid of it. I just can't have it anywhere near me. The smell, the worst bit is like the stringy bits. It's just everything about it makes me heave. There's been incidences where I've been into supermarkets and I've had to hold my breath, and then certain big supermarkets will have massive sections just dedicated to bananas. Not sure why, not needed.
Only bananas, nothing else.
Also weird thing with mayonnaise, but that's something else.
Okay.
But generally, bananas are the worst thing. A lot of my friends and colleagues think it's quite funny.
Yeah, but it's not. Well, it is and it isn't. I don't know if there's a German word for that. It's funny, but it isn't funny. It's not funny when you're having a panic attack because of a banana, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It makes me feel quite uncomfortable. And if people are eating it near me, I have to move away or ask them to stop.
And that's weird.
Yeah. So
well,
I'm okay with admitting it.
Yeah, well, I know. Well, I hope you don't encounter any bananas today, Anisha. That's all I can think of to say. What a week. What a show. Thank you. What a call. What a banana. If you missed any of today's show...
Can I ask?
Yes, of course
Sorry.
you can. Anything
Do you think it might be connected to synesthesia? Have you heard of synesthesia, where different senses collide somehow?
Well, that's why I asked... Well, it's not specifically why I asked whether she had any other... Because that wouldn't be just a one-off thing, would it, if it was linked to a broader condition?
Potentially, although I have a little touch of synesthesia myself. Yeah, I see colours. I see numbers in colour.
Do you really?
Yeah, all of them.
Wow.
And
what do you like with bananas?
I'm totally fine with bananas, but do you know what I have a distaste for rather than phobia of?
Let's not get personal, please.
Buttons.
Oh, that we had a phobia earlier.
Phobia of buttons.
She doesn't have a single button on all her
I know.
garments.
I can cope with them, but I don't like them.
Velcro zips, press
Weird.
studs.
I think this is synesthesia related. Is my guess.
Oh, it's a fascinating area.
Save that one up for next week's Mystery Hour.
You're on, I will. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also, what's the word for a phobia of podcasts? Where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now I was going to try and say your name with synesthesia inserted. Synesthesia.
Yeah.
James O'Brien on LBC.